The hush that fell over the courtyard was thicker than morning fog over the neck. Every noble, knight, and freedman had grown still as stone, for they knew they stood on the cusp of history. The previous days of tumult, Drogon vanishing into the sky, Daenerys lying still where she had fallen, the unsullied rank and file glowering at all, now felt like a half-forgotten nightmare. The stillness that replaced the chaos felt unnerving. The air itself was heavy with dread or hope, and none could say which was more powerful in that moment. Tyrion Lannister, battered in spirit but unbroken in mind, glanced about the dragon pit, his chains clinking softly. The only other man making any real sound was Ser Davos Seaworth, who shifted from foot to foot on the uneven stones. The rest of the lords and ladies of the great houses, Gendry Baratheon, Yara Greyjoy, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, Bran Stark, Brienne of Tarth, Robin Arryn, Samwell Tarly, and more besides, awaited the verdict from the boy who had seen more than any man living. The boy who had once been Brandon Stark of Winterfell, now the three-eyed raven who looked at the world with ancient eyes that belied his youth. Tyrion had spoken of choosing a king in a realm broken by war, hunger, and grief. He had championed Bran, the reluctant seer, to guide them forward. Who better to lead us, Tyrion had said, voice quivering with emotion and fervor, than the one who has no desire for power, who holds all our stories inside him, who can never be corrupted by ambition or fear. Bran the Broken shall be our king. And in that silence, everything seemed to pivot on the boy's answer. Yet from Bran's lips there came no immediate acceptance. His face, as tranquil as a glass pond, betrayed neither eagerness nor revulsion. Then Bran Stark stirred in his seat with his useless legs folded beneath him, and the silence quivered as if it might crack. All eyes clung to him. I thank you for the honor you do me, Bran said softly, his voice carrying a curious resonance. But I cannot be king. A wave of surprise rippled through the dragon pit. Tyrion's face went slack. He glanced at Bran, worried. What do you mean? Tyrion asked, clearing his throat. We believe you are the best suited. Bran's stare was steady. You want me to rule because I hold the memories of the realm. You want me to make decisions to guide you into a future that may not repeat the horrors of the past. But that is not what I see for myself. It is not what the realm needs. Sansa, expression taut with confusion and hurt, pressed her lips together. Bran, she whispered, don't you understand the gravity of this moment? He turned that ancient gaze upon his sister. I do, more than all of you. That is precisely why I cannot wear the crown. Arya eyed him with silent curiosity. She seemed both relieved and worried at the same time. Ser Brienne, posture ramrod straight, looked from the boy to Tyrion. Unsullied guards kept watch with no expression to betray their thoughts, if they had any at all. Samwell Tarly, quiet until now, managed in a shaky voice. But then who? All eyes flicked to each other. Some looked to Gendry, who, as Robert Baratheon's only acknowledged heir, carried a claim. Others looked at Sansa or Tyrion or perhaps even Yara. But Sam's eyes had fallen upon Jon Snow, who stood at the back in worn leathers, hair lank with sweat, posture bent under guilt and sorrow. He had been brought before them a prisoner by the Unsullied, indicted for the murder of Daenerys Targaryen. Grey Worm's fury had not abated, but Tyrion had insisted they could not condemn Jon without a king or queen to pronounce final judgment. Now, ironically, the question was, who would be that king or queen? Bran's voice, quiet but unyielding, broke the hush. It must be Jon. Jon stiffened, his eyes darting up. At first, the words sounded like a condemnation, as if Bran might say it must be Jon who would face punishment or exile. But the hush felt as if it swallowed air itself. Bran said, I see him as you cannot. The realms of men will not heal with any other on the throne. All of this, all the wars and the losses have led us here. In my vision of what is to come, the man the realm needs is the one who does not want the crown. Jon's lips parted, a protest rising in his throat. His breath came sharply. He said, voice raspy, I can't. I took her life. I broke my vows. I've done nothing but fail. Yet in that moment, Bran's expression held a pity and an understanding beyond mortal ken. You did what had to be done. The realm will understand that in time. More importantly, you are the blood of the dragon and the wolf, a unifier of the old lines. The North has fought with you, the free folk follow you, and the South knows your mercy. You are Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, yet you stand here as Jon Snow, a living bridge between House Targaryen and House Stark. The realm must be bound in unity now, or it will shatter beyond repair." Tyrion, for once, was left speechless. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Finally, he said, "Your claim is as strong as anyone's, Jon. Daenerys. She was your aunt, though you loved her as—" He faltered for a moment, regaining composure. "As a lover, yes, but you are also the rightful heir after her, if one follows lineage. And if Bran sees this as the correct path, then perhaps we must heed him." A restless shifting among the lords and ladies ensued, but there was no immediate outcry. The fury they had felt about the Targaryen name seemed tempered by Daenerys' recent downfall. Yet the name Targaryen still carried a potent aura, one that evoked dragons and conquest, but perhaps also the promise of a new era. Gendry's jaw tightened, but he offered no condemnation. Sansa stared at Jon with complicated emotion. Arya stood as still as a weirwood, her gray eyes flicking from Bran to Jon. And Sam, with tears in his eyes, gave Jon a small, hopeful nod. Jon's heart hammered so loudly in his ears that it almost drowned out every other thought. "I do not want it," he muttered, voice laden with guilt and dread. "I never wanted it." Bran's voice was gentle. "No, you don't. That is why you must." Some might say a hush followed that was so profound the gods themselves might have stopped breathing if gods needed breath. And at last, it was Sansa who broke the tension. "You always were the best of us," she said. "Even when we were children, even though you carried a bastard's name. You led the Night's Watch through terror. You faced the White Walkers. You united the North when no one else could. If any man deserves to wear the crown now." Jon's hand balled into a fist. "I deserve no crown. I killed Daenerys. I broke my vows." His words were raw, full of grief. "She loved me, believed in me. And he faltered, feeling the hollowness in his gut, the memory of the knife sliding between her ribs. He remembered the final spark in her violet eyes. "I lost my honor." But Sam Tarly, soft-spoken as always, found the strength to speak up. "So did I once upon a time when I stole from the Citadel. When I abandoned my father's house to join the Night's Watch. We've all broken something in this war. If brokenness disqualifies us from leading, none of us could sit here claiming any seat at all." Grey Worm stood at the edge, silent, his jaw tight, measuring each word. Jon expected an explosion of rage. After all, Grey Worm had wanted vengeance for his queen. Yet, in the end, the stoic Unsullied only said, "We will accept the will of the lords of Westeros, but we demand justice. You have killed the breaker of chains." Jon stared back. "I will bear whatever punishment I must," he said, voice iron. "But do not put me on that throne." It was Tyrion who turned now to the Unsullied commander. "You say you want justice. Yet what would your queen have wanted if she had not succumbed to the madness in her final days? Do you truly believe she would want Westeros to remain broken and forever prone to new tyrants? Jon Snow ended her life, yes, but it was to save untold thousands from Dragon fire. Whether we call it mercy or betrayal, what's done is done. The question is, how do we move forward?" Grey Worm's face flickered with emotion, so faint it was nearly imperceptible. Then he said, "Daenerys wanted to break the wheel, to free the slaves and the oppressed. If we are to let Jon Snow live, let him prove he will continue her work in some way." Bran, unblinking, regarded Grey Worm. "If Jon takes the throne, Daenerys' memory can be honored by ensuring those who were freed remain free. That all who were oppressed will find a champion in their king. The Unsullied can sail to Naath. That was your dream with Missandei, was it not?" Grey Worm blinked and lowered his gaze. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Yes," he said softly. "It was our dream. But that does not mean I yield." "You needn't yield," Bran said. "You need only accept what must be." A wind seemed to ruffle across the broken dome overhead, rustling hair and tattered banners. With no small amount of reluctance, Grey Worm gave a curt nod. "Let it be so then," he said. "If the lords of Westeros agree." All turned to look at each other. Sansa's face was solemn. Gendry shifted, uncertain. Yara Greyjoy frowned, narrowing her eyes. "The last Targaryen that sat the throne used dragons to kill our people," she said. "Are we sure we want the name Targaryen back on that seat?" Tyrion said. "He is as much Stark as Targaryen, and he bent the knee once to your queen, Yara. He never sought to subjugate you. If you'd have your independence, speak it, but consider the realm." A moment's tension crackled until Yara sighed, shoulders sagging. "Fine, I'll recognize the new king, if he truly keeps the Iron Islands free to govern themselves as they always have." Daenerys promised us autonomy once. Let him honor that promise. Jon's mind reeled at every voice, every demand, swirling like a storm in his skull. He drew in a breath, ready to protest. But at that moment, Sansa stepped forward, her bearing regal, her gaze steady. "Jon," she said, "look at me." He lifted his eyes to meet hers. She who had fought tooth and nail for Winterfell, who had endured the horrors inflicted on her by Joffrey and Ramsay. She who had learned to survive in the lion's den and the wolf's domain. She had grown stronger than any of them imagined. "You love this realm more than you love yourself," she said. "That is why you hesitate. But there is no one else. The realm needs a king who does not yearn for power." Jon swallowed thickly, feeling the dryness in his throat. "I only know how to fight," he murmured. "I have never been good at politics." "Then you'll surround yourself with those who are," Tyrion said, voice quietly urgent. "Sansa is as shrewd as any, perhaps even more than I. Davos is wise, Sam is learned. Brienne is honorable. Grey Worm and the Unsullied can watch for the justice of the freed. We can do this together, Jon." The knowledge pressed down on him, heavier than a sword in his hand or any fur cloak on his shoulders. He sought some escape in the eyes of the onlookers, but found none. All were awaiting his decision. The realm itself seemed to hold its breath. Bran's voice, calm and clear, offered a final push. "What unites people?" he had once heard Tyrion say. "Stories." And in Bran's voice was the echo of Ian's. "The realm needs a story of unity, not conquest. Will you give them that?" For a moment, Jon shut his eyes, remembering Ghost, the faithful direwolf who had followed him beyond the wall. He remembered the scorching heat of Dragonfire as he soared on Rhaegal's back. He remembered the cold nights at the wall, and the hot blood pumping in his veins when he tried to save everyone he could. The realm's story was that of repeated tragedy, repeated vengeance. Perhaps, for once, they could break that cycle. He opened his eyes, took a breath, and gave a single nod. "If this is what you all truly want." Then his voice shook. "Then I will do my duty. For the realm." It was done. The moment those words left his lips, he felt as though the ground dropped away beneath him. The hush broke into soft murmurs that rippled with relief, uncertainty, and a strange sense of hopeful finality. In the eyes of the lords and ladies of Westeros, a decision had been reached. Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, if you will, would be their king. Grey Worm only studied him a moment longer. Then he turned on his heel, snapping orders to the Unsullied. "We will depart these shores soon. We have no wish to remain here." He lingered as though waiting for someone to stop him, but none did. Then, with a backward glance at Jon, he left the dragon pit to gather his men. All that was left was for Jon to truly claim what he had never wanted. He stood in the dragon pit, trembling inside, though he let no outward sign betray him. Sansa was at his side. "Arya near?" Tyrion faced him with a look that was half relief, half something else, remorse, perhaps, for placing yet another burden on Jon's shoulders. Sam Tarly ventured a small, hopeful smile. A new age was dawning if only they could shape it correctly. And in that single instant before chaos resumed, before all the demands and alliances, the pleas and treaties, Bran met Jon's eyes, and Jon thought he saw just a flicker of regret, or was it gratitude? In the swirl of fate, they had each played their part. Word spread like ravens from the capital to the far corners of the land. Jon Snow, also known as Aegon Targaryen, has ascended to the Iron Throne. The news traveled across seas to the Iron Islands, across the narrow waters to the free cities, up the King's Road to the north, echoing from the stony walls of Winterfell to the stilted towns on the edge of the Gift. No longer was there a mad queen in power. Instead, there was a quiet, grim man with eyes that had seen too much death. Jon insisted that the people call him by the name they had always known if they called him anything at all. "The realm may call me King Jon if they must," he said in private to Tyrion as the first supplicants arrived. "I don't care for styling myself as Aegon. That name never felt like mine." Yet public proclamations insisted on the full Targaryen lineage. After all, it had to be known he was the blood of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Tyrion fussed over matters of heraldry and lineage, while Jon wanted none of it. Davos, newly made an advisor, though hand had yet to be formally assigned, merely shook his head in faint amusement. "You'll have to accept some pomp, Your Grace," Davos said gently. "The people need the pageantry. It helps them believe in the crown." Jon's jaw tightened, his mouth twisting in a frown. They need food. They need peace. Not pageantry. But he relented because he had chosen to do his duty, and if duty meant letting the realm cling to symbols, so be it. The first days in the Red Keep were an exercise in both heartbreak and discovery. Rubble from the final battle still littered many corridors. The city had not fully recovered from the dragon's wrath. A great portion of the population had been uprooted, their homes burned or destroyed, their families missing. Tens of thousands either starved or relied on meager charity. The outer gates of the city had become a vast refugee camp. A stench of decay and hopelessness clung to the air. Jon spent those days gathering what resources he could, moving the city's gold reserves, much of which had been seized when Daenerys took King's Landing, into efforts to feed and shelter the people. He ordered the royal kitchens to be reopened in full to distribute bread and stew. He commanded that the unscrupulous merchants hoarding grain be brought to account. Refugees found at least a roof beneath the partially rebuilt keep walls. All the while, a swirl of rumors spread. The new king is a Targaryen, but half Stark, some whispered. He was the one who knelt to Daenerys. Others said he slew his own queen. Is that not treason? But more hopeful voices rose. He fought the dead at Winterfell. He's a hero who came back from death itself. Whichever rumor found traction, the people were curious enough to watch the Red Keep, peering up at the windows where the new king might stand. But Jon never stood at the windows to revel in the crowds. Whenever he looked out over the city, it was with a somber gaze that gleaned heartbreak and regret. He had not asked for these throngs to gather before him any more than he had asked to be crowned. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and met with the common folk whenever he could. More than one beggar was astonished to see the new king walk among them, listening to their pleas, trying to direct them to shelter. The gold cloaks who accompanied him insisted he keep a guard, but even they murmured that they had never seen a king so hands-on with the suffering in the streets. In these early days, Tyrion emerged from the shadows of disgrace to stand at Jon's right hand. Jon accepted Tyrion's counsel with polite but distinct wariness. After all, it was Tyrion who had pulled so many strings. But Tyrion's brilliance could not be denied. "We must rebuild the infrastructure," Tyrion said, eyes flickering with that old cunning. "We'll bring stonemasons from across the realm, pay them from the royal treasury. We'll need alliances with the Reach to ensure stable harvest deliveries so the city can eat over winter. We must also handle Euron's leftover reavers. Pockets of them lurk across the seas, taking advantage of the chaos to raid. If we don't quell them, the shipping lanes will remain too dangerous for trade." Jon found the swirl of tasks endless. At times, he could hardly get a breath. He found some solace in the faces of friends: Sansa, who came down from Winterfell once she had ensured the North's stability; Arya, who lingered only briefly, confessing she had no desire to remain in the South. She yearned for unknown horizons. But she stayed just long enough to watch Jon ascend the throne in a ceremony so hasty and understated that some scolded it for lacking the majesty of a true coronation. They crowned him in the Great Hall, its rubble partially cleared, the Iron Throne itself having been melted by dragonfire. There was nothing left of that seat except twisted slag. In its place, a new seat had been fashioned in as minimal a design as possible, a single block of dark stone, polished smooth, with a slight arch at the back. It was no grand throne, but neither did Jon desire one. He sat upon it for the first time under the solemn watch of the lords and ladies. Sansa placed a simple circlet of Valyrian steel upon his head, recovered from some Targaryen relic. No swords jutted out, no crowns encrusted with rubies or diamonds. It was a circlet, dark gray, hammered with faint runes that might have once belonged to House Targaryen, though time had worn them away. As she set it on Jon's head, she allowed herself the faintest smile, and he glimpsed love and pride in her eyes, though sorrow lingered there too. Tyrion announced him to the assembly. "Behold, Jon of houses Targaryen and Stark, sixth of his name to claim the Targaryen line, king of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the first men, protector of the realm." Applause echoed in the hall, though subdued. The realm was far too broken for roaring celebrations. Jon, feeling the cool metal press his hair, thought he might drown under the weight of it. He said only, "I will do my best. The realm deserves no less." In that moment, the hush that followed was a potent thing, an unspoken agreement that the new king was not the kind to waste words. That hush was broken as Sansa knelt, followed by all the other lords and ladies. Even Ro. Then Aaron awkwardly dropped to one knee, though he stumbled a bit. Gendry bowed his head. Yara gave a curt nod but kneeled just the same. Highgarden's new representative, an elderly lady with a wry smile, knelt. Sam was the last to kneel, tears in his eyes again, but shining with pride. "Long live the king," someone whispered, and the words rippled through the hall. Long live the king. The next weeks were a flurry of tasks and reorganizations. In truth, there was no well-oiled machine to pass from one monarch to the next. The city's bureaucracy was in tatters. The master of coin, master of laws, master of whisperers, none of these official positions were filled. Many had died or fled. Some had sworn themselves to Daenerys and perished in the flames or were executed by her earlier in her campaign. Jon found himself forced to rely on Tyrion's knowledge of who was competent, who was corrupt, and who could be trusted to fill such posts. One morning, Tyrion came to Jon's chambers sparse and cold as Jon had not had time or inclination to decorate and placed a thick ledger on the table. "We must name a hand," Tyrion said carefully. "The realm needs a recognized second-in-command." Jon rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "I was hoping you'd do it. Sansa is needed in the north. Davos is better with ships and trade. Sam has the Citadel to reorganize if he chooses to accept the position as Grand Maester. That leaves you." Tyrion's eyes flickered with a hint of dread. "You would have me serve as your hand after my failings?" "You were Daenerys' hand," Jon said softly, "and you tried to advise her to show mercy. She refused. You're not without fault, but who among us isn't? The realm doesn't need perfect men, it needs men who've learned from their mistakes." Tyrion let out a breath, relief warring with lingering guilt. "Your Grace," he said, bowing his head in acceptance. "Then I shall do my best." With Tyrion in his hand, Davos took a position as master of ships. The vacated seat of Highgarden had gone to a new house chosen by the surviving Tyrell bannermen, though that process was messy. Gendry Baratheon had been legitimized by Daenerys, but Storm's End was his domain, not the Reach. The lordly families of the Reach needed reorganization to ensure grain deliveries and domestic stability. Tyrion began drafting letters to every corner of Westeros, urging them to swear fealty and join the new king in rebuilding the realm. More letters flew to Dorne, where the new prince or princess had yet to be determined. The Martell line had been all but extinguished, but someone needed to assume control. Jon was hazy on the details, trusting Tyrion to handle negotiations. Meanwhile, Sam Tarly, who had studied at the Citadel, was invited to become a member of the King's Council, though Jon did not insist he give up his hopes of returning to the library towers. Sam, somewhat sheepishly, accepted the position of Grand Maester in training, pending the Citadel's official recognition. He was not yet an Archmaester, but with so many lost in the war, Sam was as close to a learned Maester as they had. He wore plain Maester's robes, though he had not yet forged a full chain. At times, Sansa and Arya lingered in the Red Keep. Sansa spent days in council with Jon, advising him on the temperament of the North. She refused to have the North be subjugated as it had been under previous Southern kings. "The North will not bend so easily," she warned. "We declared ourselves free when Daenerys took the throne. You are our brother, yes, but you are also half a Targaryen. Some Northerners will feel uneasy about that. Some might even resent it." Jon nodded gravely. "I won't hold the North by force. If the North wishes to remain separate, I won't stop them." Sansa pursed her lips. "You would let the realm break right after it's put itself back together? I'm not forcing you to kneel, Sansa. If the North wants independence, let them have it. Peacefully if possible." Sansa studied him for a long, quiet moment, reading something in his eyes. "The North might be better off if we remain part of the Seven Kingdoms, if we're truly recognized as a distinct region with our own autonomy." "I cannot decide alone," she said. "But know this, I'll always stand by you, Jon, even if we differ on how best to govern." He reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you, Sansa." Arya, meanwhile, was restless as ever. She found the Red Keep stifling. She spent most of her time in the city's backstreets, exploring or training with the Braavosi style in the remnants of the training yard. A few knights dared to cross blades with her wooden sparring sword and found themselves bested by her lethal grace. She seldom spoke of where she would go next, only that she had no intention of wearing fancy dresses or playing at ladyship. Jon suspected she might set sail west of Westeros soon. The thought pained him. He had only just found his family again, but Arya never could be caged. Still, she lingered long enough to watch Jon acclimate to his new station, perhaps to ensure he was safe. Once, she found him in his private chamber, tossing and turning on a bed that still felt alien. He was groaning softly in his sleep, lost in a nightmare. She gently shook him awake, and he bolted upright, eyes wide with fear. She said nothing about it. Arya was no stranger to nightmares, but she placed a hand on his shoulder. He realized it was the first truly affectionate gesture she had given him since arriving in King's Landing, and it nearly undid him. She did not ask what visions haunted him. She merely stayed until his breathing steadied, then gave him a thin, reassuring smile like a ghost from their childhood. In that moment, Jon felt an ache in his heart that was both love and sorrow. He wanted them all to be free of war and burdens, and yet he wore the crown. King's Landing was a broken city. The rooftops were scorched black. Entire districts crumbled into ruin from the final assault by Dragonfire. The Great September had been destroyed by Cersei's wildfire some time before, never rebuilt. The city's moral was battered, with many calling for revenge against Targaryens. Ironically, but now that a Targaryen sat upon a new seat in the Red Keep, the survivors lived in a swirl of contradictions. Fear, confusion, cautious hope. Jon's steps were heavy as he walked among the wreckage. Flanked by a small contingent of gold cloaks, he moved through a street of burned-out shops. The stench of ashes and rot mingled with the brine wafting from Blackwater Bay. A child, grubby-faced and skittish, peered from behind a splintered cart. Jon paused, lowering himself to one knee to meet the child's eyes on a level. "You hungry?" he asked quietly. The child did not respond, too frightened. One of the gold cloaks muttered, "Probably an orphan, Your Grace." Jon bit back a curse at the unnecessary formality in front of this child. Rummaging in a pouch he carried, he produced a small packet of dried meat. Setting it on the stones in front of the child, he offered a gentle nod. "Take it. It's yours." No sign of understanding came from the child, only a wide-eyed fear. But eventually the child darted forward to snatch the packet, then retreated behind the cart like a feral creature. Jon felt a pang in his chest. This was the legacy left by the wars. Orphans who trusted no one, famine in the streets. He rose, the gold cloaks following. Tyrion had advised him not to make these solitary excursions. It wasn't safe or prudent, but Jon could not remain behind walls, ignorant of the city's plight. The weight of the crown pressed upon him like a chain of ice around his neck. He continued down a muddy alley that opened into a small square. Here, men and women rummaged through refuse piles, searching for scraps. A few recognized him and dropped to their knees out of reflex. Others glared. One man spat on the ground in front of Jon. "You Targaryens," he growled, "burned my home, burned my wife and son." Jon stopped. The gold cloaks bristled, stepping forward. "Watch your tongue," their captain barked, hand on the hilt of his sword, but Jon raised a hand to stay them. "Your family," Jon said softly. "I'm sorry." He had no illusions that an apology would mean much, but it was all he could do, standing in the wreckage Daenerys's wrath had wrought. The man's lips trembled, and for a moment, Jon thought he might surge forward in violence. Instead, the man broke down, tears carving grimy tracks on his cheeks. He sank to his knees, sobbing in rage and despair. Jon could only stand and watch. This is my duty, Jon thought, to mend what has been broken. He felt powerless, though a crown rested on his brow. With quiet urgency, he ordered the gold cloaks to bring bread from the distribution wagons to feed these people. Day after day, he witnessed more such scenes, and each one carved a deeper line into his soul. In secret, he often asked himself if the realm would be better off with some other figure on the throne. But no one stepped forward to claim it, and time after time, those who glimpsed the heartbreak in his eyes would remark that the new king cared, though he was powerless to resurrect the dead. In time, that sorrowful sincerity began to sow a fragile trust among some of the city's inhabitants. One evening, Jon stood on a balcony of the Red Keep, gazing across the city. Torchlight and campfires dotted the gloom, the vast sprawl reminding him of a wounded beast. Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned to see Tyrion with a ledger in hand. "You look exhausted, Your Grace," Tyrion said quietly. Jon rested both hands on the stone ledge. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Too many voices in my head. The living, the dead. All of it." Tyrion nodded with empathy. "I have known those midnight hauntings myself, though perhaps not in the same measure as you." He paused, glancing at the city. "I bring news from the north. Sansa writes that the harvest is fair, but winter's teeth still threaten. She also writes that some northern lords balk at the idea of bending the knee to a Targaryen. She tries to reason with them, reminding them you are also Ned Stark's son, in all but name. Yet their pride runs deep. Jon's chest tightened. Let them do as they will. If the North truly wants independence, I won't hold them by force. I've told her that. Tyrion sighed. There's more. She says that tensions run high. If you were to visit in person, perhaps hold a council in Winterfell, it might quell unrest. Show them that you're not the second coming of the Mad King. The notion of returning to Winterfell made Jon's heart twist with longing and dread. I will go, he said, but not yet. There's too much to rebuild here first. Tyrion nodded. We're making progress, slow though it may be. Stone by stone, we'll rebuild the city. The new city guard is shaping up. Sam's working on a Ravenry system for better communication. And Davos has begun negotiations to open the ports for trade. If we can secure the harvest from the Reach, we can feed people through the coming winter, at least in part. Jon let the words hang. Thank you, he said at last, turning to Tyrion. Truly, I know you had your share of mistakes, but your counsel is invaluable. A faint, rueful smile curved Tyrion's lips. I once believed in queens and kings who turned out to be quite flawed. I'm placing my faith in a man who never wanted the power. Let's hope I finally chose well. They exchanged a small, understanding nod. Then Tyrion looked at Jon with a cautious expression. The matter of the Night's Watch must also be addressed, he said quietly. Grey Worm demanded justice. We arranged for you to. Well, if you had refused the throne, you might have been exiled. But now that you're king, perhaps we must consider some restitution. Or at least an acknowledgement of wrongdoing in Daenerys' death. Some of her old followers remain in Essos. They might cause trouble if they see her killer unpunished. Jon frowned. He had wrestled with this since the moment he accepted the crown. Perhaps there is no punishment that can satisfy them, he said slowly. No single action that can wash away the blood on my hands. Tyrion pursed his lips. I suspect you're right. Jon nodded, turning back to the city. Then let them hate me if they must. Let them come if they must. I won't hide from what I've done. Tyrion hesitated, then quietly left, leaving Jon alone to watch as the last sparks of daylight died behind the horizon. As the weeks passed, the call to journey north grew louder. Davos argued that securing the north was paramount to forging true unity across the kingdom. Sam pointed out that a stable north meant more resources freed up to rebuild King's Landing and the rest of Westeros. Tyrion added it may be wise to hold a grand council in Winterfell, inviting the lords of the Vale, the Riverlands, and the North so they can hear you in person. Jon finally agreed, though he dreaded leaving King's Landing so soon. The capital's rebuilding efforts needed constant oversight. Tyrion assured him that the council could function in his absence, that Lord Gendry of the Stormlands would help maintain order, that the City Watch was being restructured under a new commander who wasn't a sellsword. We'll manage, Tyrion said. You're no good to the realm if a third of it refuses to acknowledge you. Secure the north and the rest will follow. Jon set forth with a carefully assembled party. Sansa had already returned to prepare Winterfell for his arrival, her messages increasingly urgent. Arya, after her period of restless wandering in the city, decided to ride north with him, though she hinted she might not remain. Brienne of Tarth joined them as well, for she was sworn to protect Sansa and had some responsibilities in the north to finalize with her vow to Catelyn Stark. A small retinue of gold cloaks accompanied them, though Jon insisted on traveling lightly. He detested the idea of a massive royal procession that would drain the inns and farmsteads of their meager supplies. Instead, the party rode in practical lines, carrying half the burden on wagons. They made their way up the King's Road, once more passing by the scorched farmland that had been ravaged by the wars. Some villages were still in ruins, others were slowly rebuilding. At each hamlet, people came out to stare at the traveling king. Some cheered, some only watched with wary eyes. The mood was a tapestry of hope and caution, the joy of an end to war tempered by fear of new tyranny. Arya was quiet for most of the journey, sometimes scouting ahead. Occasionally she would vanish for hours only to return with reports that the road was clear. Jon had grown used to her silent comings and goings. At night, she would slip away from the campfire to practice her sword forms under the stars or to stand watch with that intense focus in her gaze. Brienne rode near the front, eyes ever vigilant. She conversed politely with Jon when needed, though she seemed more at ease trading quiet remarks with Podrick Payne, who had grown into a capable young knight or near-knight. She assured Jon that Sansa had the North well in hand, but recognized the complexities of northern pride. They love the Starks, Brienne said. You especially if they recall your defense of Winterfell against the dead. But the Targaryen name might complicate matters. Jon gave a weary nod. Then let them see I'm no conqueror. They eventually passed the Trident, crossing the Great Fork in the Riverlands where the memory of Robert's rebellion still loomed. The travelers from the north who recognized Jon called him the White Wolf, recalling his time as king in the north. Jon corrected them that he was no longer only of the north, but a king for all the realm. That assertion earned both nods and frowns. At Mo Caelan, the old fortress that guarded the Neck, they found a small northern garrison loyal to House Stark. The men looked surprised to see the king in such a modest party. One of them, a grizzled sergeant with a patch over one eye, approached stiffly, uncertain how to greet royalty. Jon dismounted, gripping the man's arm in greeting. "No need for ceremony," he said. "We're just passing through." The man gaped a bit, then offered a quick bow. "Welcome back to the north, your grace." Jon's chest tightened. The words stirred memories. He turned and looked northward towards the vast swaths of pine and snow, the rolling hills that would lead eventually to Winterfell. "Thank you," he murmured, unsure if his gratitude was for the welcome or for something else, like the simple fact that the north was still standing, still strong. They rode on. The air grew chill as they went further, the wind sharper. The very scent of the air changed, clean, bracing, laced with pine and the tang of distant frost. Jon felt a stirring in his heart, an echo of the boy he had once been, roaming Winterfell's courtyard, watching his siblings from a distance, wanting to be recognized as one of them. When Winterfell's gray walls loomed at last before them, smoke drifting from chimneys, the sight brought a lump to Jon's throat. He was returning not as a brother or a lord, but as a king. He did not relish the distinction. He dismounted outside the gates, already seeing that the courtyard was bustling with preparations, men and women in cloaks of stark gray and dire wolf sigils ready to greet him. He recognized a few faces from the old days. A hush spread among them as he and his company passed under the archway. Only the sound of hooves and the creak of leather gear accompanied them. Inside the courtyard, Sansa stood on the steps leading to the great hall. She wore a warm cloak of dark wool trimmed in subtle northern patterns. Her hair was braided in a style reminiscent of their mother. Beside her stood a small retinue of northern lords, Lord Glover, Lord Manderley, Lady Serwyn, among others. Their expressions ranged from respectful to guarded. Jon halted, handing his reins to a stable boy who eyed him with wide, reverent eyes. Then he climbed the steps. Sansa, with a small smile, curtsied in a manner that was perhaps half teasing, half genuine. "Your Grace," she said, loud enough for all to hear. He felt a surge of warmth at seeing her. Yet he also felt the eyes of the lords upon him. He cleared his throat. "Sansa," he said simply, inclining his head in greeting, though he resisted the formality of an embrace, mindful of the watchers. Still, she clasped his hands in hers, leaning in to whisper so only he could hear. "Welcome home." Those two words nearly undid him. For the first time in months, he felt the faint stirrings of genuine relief. He squeezed her hands back. "Thank you." She turned to the northern lords gathered. "My lords, allow me to present his grace, Jon of Houses Targaryen and Stark, King of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men." She paused with a slight smirk that only Jon would catch. "But I believe we all know him as Jon Snow, who once was king in the north." A rumble passed through the crowd. Some knelt, some bowed, some only dipped their heads. Lord Glover, who had once refused the call to arms, looked particularly grim. Manderley, a large man with a booming voice, stepped forward. "Welcome, your grace. We have many matters to discuss, but first let us offer you the hospitality of Winterfell." Jon inclined his head. He wanted no fanfare, yet he understood the forms. Hospitality is always cherished. "Thank you." He allowed Sansa to guide him inside, leaving the cold courtyard behind. The great hall had changed little. The high rafters, the smoke from the hearth, the banners hanging, there was a sense of timelessness here. For a moment as Jon entered, he half expected to see Ned Stark seated at the high table. But only emptiness greeted them aside from the table set with cups of ale and bread. He paused, rubbing his chest as if it pained him. Memories crashed over him in a wave, Ned's stern but kind face, Robb's laughter, even the ghosts of those days when he had been a boy among siblings who were not quite siblings. He blinked them away. "Jon," Sansa said softly, her hand on his arm. He realized he'd frozen in place. He exhaled, moving forward. They had business to conduct, after all. In the days that followed, the northern lords convened to debate the North's status within the Seven Kingdoms. Some insisted the North remain independent, that their dead had spilled enough blood fighting southern wars. Others argued that with Jon as king, the North would hold more power in the realm than ever before, ensuring none could threaten them again. The debate grew heated. Jon sat at the head of the table in a large chamber off the great hall, a crackling hearth behind him. Sansa took a seat to his right, quietly orchestrating the conversation. Lord Glover was especially vocal about northern independence. "We declared for king in the north once, and you swore to defend us," Glover said, eyes narrowed. "Now you return as a Targaryen king. How do we know the north won't be used and cast aside again?" Jon leaned forward, voice measured. "Because I'm still the same man who bled for the north at the Battle of the Bastards. I'm still the same man who rode beyond the wall to gather allies to fight the undead. My name changed, my responsibilities changed, but my loyalties have not. And yet your blood is Targaryen," Glover pressed. "How can we be certain you won't bring dragons to our doorstep once more?" "There are no more dragons here," Jon said quietly, though he thought of Drogon somewhere out there, far beyond. "But that's not the point. The point is, I will not force you to bend the knee. If the North truly wishes to stand alone, I won't stand in your way." A murmur rose among the lords. Some exchanged uncertain glances. Sansa gazed at Jon with a hint of pride and worry. She understood the magnitude of what he was offering. No southern king had ever so freely relinquished the claim to the north. It might be seen by some as weakness, by others as benevolence. Lord Manderley stroked his chin. "We appreciate your words, your grace. But we must also consider whether the north is safer as part of the larger realm. We face harsh winters and we rely on southern trade for grain. If we remain separate, we risk isolation. Our coffers are not as full as they once were." Glover retorted that the North could stand on its own as it had for thousands of years before Aegon's conquest. Others pointed out that the realm had changed significantly. The argument seesawed back and forth while Jon listened with weary patience. At last, Sansa stood. "Lords and ladies of the North," she began, voice poised. "I understand your fears. But hear me, we know Jon Snow better than any man. He has never sought power for its own sake. He gave his life to save the realm from the White Walkers. He accepted queenship under Daenerys to gain her armies to defend Winterfell. And now that he sits upon the throne, he comes here offering you a choice. Ask yourselves, is that the action of a tyrant?" Silence followed her words. Glover looked unconvinced, but more subdued. Manderley nodded thoughtfully. Lady Cerwyn, arms folded, stared at the table. A sense of tension filled the air, as though any moment a heated outcry might erupt. But then the door to the chamber opened, and a figure stepped in unannounced, Arya Stark. She had stood guard outside, but evidently decided to join the fray. Her eyes swept over the assembled lords. "You lot can argue until the snow covers your ankles," Arya said, her tone clipped. "But you should remember what's important. We stand here breathing because of Jon. We survived the long night because of him. Yes, and Daenerys. Yes, and many others. But it was Jon who made the alliances. And if not for him, House Glover would have no keep to speak of." Lord Glover flushed, anger rising. "You dare." "I dare," she said coolly. "You refused the call to fight at Winterfell, and Jon forgave you. He asked for your help again, offering you nothing but trust. You owe him your lives, and yet you speak of trusting him as if that's in question." She gave him a cold smile. "Is that how your honor stands?" The tension was almost tangible. Yet no one rebuked Arya. They all recalled how many Starks had died, how the house had endured. Glover coughed into his hand. "We do not question his valor. Only the future of the North," he muttered. Arya scoffed softly. "Then trust the man you know. If you wish to leave the realm, he'll let you. But perhaps it's time the North leads Westeros instead of running from it." With that, she turned and strode out of the room, leaving a stunned silence. Jon felt a surge of gratitude and a hint of amusement at his sister's directness. He cleared his throat, looking over the table. "I won't force your decision. The realm must heal. If you see a place for the North within that healing, I welcome it. If you see no place, then so be it." Sansa gave him a subtle nod, admiring how he handled himself. Slowly, one by one, the lords began to speak in calmer tones. The debate that had raged for hours softened into more measured discussion. They decided to hold a formal council the next day, after each house had time to consider. The gathering dispersed, leaving Jon and Sansa alone in the chamber. She let out a sigh, shaking her head. That was better than expected. I'm not certain which way they'll vote, but I suspect they'll remain part of the realm. Jon sank into a chair, removing his cloak. I hope so. If the realm fractures now, more conflict might arise. But I won't hold them captive. The North deserves better than that. Sansa looked at him with an odd tenderness. You've grown wiser since we last saw each other at length. Or perhaps more weary. I can see the weight in your eyes, Jon. He exhaled, feeling the heaviness in his bones. I just want them all to be safe. Daenerys, she wanted to break the wheel, but she nearly burned the realm to cinders. I don't want to be remembered as another Targaryen tyrant. But I killed her, Sansa. Sometimes I still see her face as the life left her eyes. She placed a hand over his. You chose the realm over love? That was a sacrifice I pray no one else must ever make. Jon could not respond to that. He only stared at the flickering hearth, his thoughts drifting to the memory of Daenerys' last breath. Duty. Sacrifice. The faint echo of her voice speaking of a better world. And he had ended that dream. For better or worse, he was here now, carrying on in her stead, hoping to build something that did not require tyranny or bloodshed. To the relief of many, the North chose to remain part of the realm. Lord Glover, along with a few others, accepted the majority sentiment after lengthy deliberations. The official statement was that the North will remain united with the rest of Westeros under King Jon, with strong guarantees of autonomy and recognition of the hardships endured. Jon personally assured them that the North would have representation on the Royal Council and that Northern laws and customs would be respected. In essence, they gained a measure of near independence without fully seceding. This outcome seemed to mollify most. Feasts were held in Winterfell's Great Hall, though the cheer was subdued compared to the days before the wars. Folk were simply too tired, too full of grief. Still, there was mead and ale, roasted meats, and the storytelling tradition of the North. Minstrels sang ballads of the war, weaving tales of the heroes who fought the Night King. They sang of Jon Snow's near-legendary resurrection, of Arya Stark's lethal dance with death, of Sansa Stark's cunning leadership. The new generation of youths listened wide-eyed as if it were half legend, half reality. Jon sat at the high table, flanked by Sansa and Arya. Brienne and Podrick sat near them. Ghost, Jon's beloved white dire wolf, now fully grown, padded into the hall at one point, weaving between tables. The men parted like water before him, startled but awed. At the sight of Ghost, a few lords raised their cups in salute, remembering the days when dire wolves roamed more freely. Jon scratched behind Ghost's ear, a soft smile gracing his lips. He realized how long it had been since he'd worn that smile. Ghost whined softly, pressing against Jon's leg. The dire wolf had roamed beyond the wall for a time, but he'd been brought south again after the final battles. It felt like a fragment of Jon's old life was restored. As the minstrels played, Sansa leaned over. Look, she said, gesturing with her chin. Jon followed her gaze to see Arya dancing with Podrick, though dance was a generous term. Podrick was blushing fiercely, and Arya seemed amused by his awkward steps. She wore a slight grin as if encouraging him, though the moment he stepped too close to stepping on her toes, she adroitly moved aside. Brienne, from her seat, looked half amused, half protective. Jon let out a quiet chuckle, and Sansa's lips curved upward. In that fleeting moment, it felt almost like old times when House Stark had reason to celebrate. Yet the shadows of the past lingered. Later that evening, after the feast died down, Jon retreated to the Godwood. The heart tree stood silent, leaves rustling in the faint breeze, the face carved in the trunk weeping red sap. The night was cold, the sky cloudy, a moonless canopy overhead. Jon knelt before the tree, remembering the old prayers Ned Stark had taught him when he was just a boy who believed in the old gods. He spoke quietly, though the words were less a prayer and more a confession. I don't know what I'm doing, he whispered. I never wanted this. I still don't. But if it's my duty, then I'll do it. All I ask is the strength not to fail them again. A soft rustling behind him alerted him to someone's presence. He turned to see Bran Stark, or the three-eyed raven, though no one knew what to call him now that he had relinquished the crown. Bran's eyes seemed distant and yet strangely focused. He sat in his wheeled chair, unmoving as if the cold did not touch him. Jon rose to his feet, heart twisting. Bran, he said. Bran's voice was as soft as the wind. I remember coming here as a child, climbing the trees, pretending I was a knight. But that was a lifetime ago. Jon studied his brother. Why did you name me king? He asked, the old question brimming with a quiet desperation. I could think of 100 others better suited, yourself included. Bran blinked slowly. Because in every vision I have seen of the future, the only path that leads to a realm that endures is the one where you sit the throne. Any other choice leads to more bloodshed, more fractures. Perhaps immediate peace in some timelines, but it crumbles too soon. You alone hold the realm together, Jon. Those words fell heavily on Jon's shoulders. I don't know if I can. Too many look at me and see a Targaryen. Others see a Stark. Some see a murderer. You are all those things, Bran said simply. And so you must be king. Who better to carry the burdens of the realm than the one who understands them all? Jon turned his gaze to the weirwood. I killed the woman I loved, he said, voice breaking. How can I claim any right to rule after that? You loved her, and you stopped her because she could not stop herself, Bran said. That is the greatest act of mercy you could give to the living, if not to her. Perhaps your regrets are your penance. Jon closed his eyes, tears threatening to burn his lids. He shuddered, inhaling the crisp northern air. And you? He asked. Where will you go, now that you're not to be king? Bran was silent for a long moment. Then he answered, I will remain in the north, at least for a time. I see many paths, many threads. My purpose is not done, but it's not on the throne. I will guide as I can from here. Jon nodded, swallowing. He felt a pang of longing for the days when they were simply brothers or half-brothers, or so they believed. But the realm needed them to be more. He reached out and gently touched Bran's shoulder. Bran's expression did not change, but Jon imagined he felt that connection, however faint. Thank you, Jon murmured. The silence that followed was cool, almost comforting, under the boughs of the ancient weirwood. Jon sensed that whatever else might come, at least he had Bran's subtle reassurance that this was not all for nothing. The realm had a chance, however slim, at forging a better future. Their departure from Winterfell came a week later, after discussions concluded and new alliances were sealed. Sansa would remain Lady of Winterfell, in practice if not in official name, ensuring the North's concerns were heard at all times. The Northern Lords reaffirmed their cautious loyalty, if only because they trusted Sansa and Jon to safeguard their interests. Arya, however, declared her intention to sail west. She had spoken of it before, but now it was certain. What's west of Westeros? She asked Sansa, a hint of excitement glimmering in her gray eyes. No one knows. That's where all the maps stop. That's where I'm going. Sansa protested that Arya should at least remain for a time, but Arya shook her head. There's nothing for me here. I'm not a lady. I'm not a queen's guard. I'm not a mother. I'm a wolf who needs open ground. She looked to Jon for understanding, and he offered her a small nod. He understood the restlessness that lived in her soul. Before she departed, they had one last moment together in the courtyard. The chill wind whipped through, rustling cloaks and hair. Ghost lingered at Jon's side, watchful. Arya reached out, ruffling the direwolf's fur as she had when he was smaller. Then she turned to Jon. You have your duty, she said. I have mine. He embraced her fiercely, ignoring the stares of courtiers. Arya, he whispered, voice catching in his throat. Be safe. She smirked faintly. I don't think safe is in my nature. She pulled back. But I'll be free. That I can promise. Jon nodded, swallowing the ache in his chest. Write me if you can. Let me know you're all right. She paused, as if uncertain she'd ever be able to send ravens from wherever she ended up. But she gave him a nod. I will if I can. Then she squeezed his hand one last time and strode away, hoisting her pack, stepping into the saddle of a waiting horse that would take her to White Harbor. From there, she planned to sail into unknown waters. Jon watched until she disappeared from view, feeling the emptiness she left behind. With that, Jon too prepared to leave. He had to return to King's Landing, to the Red Keep and the weight of governance. Sansa stood at the gates, eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she said softly, for letting the North choose and for trusting me. I won't fail you. You never have, he replied, voice low. He rested a hand on her shoulder. You have a home in the South if you ever need it. You are my sister, always. She gave him a sad smile. And you mine. The North will remain loyal so long as you remain the man you've always been. He left Winterfell with a retinue, ghost padding alongside them for a while. Eventually, the direwolf loped off into the forest to hunt, returning at intervals. Jon took one last look at the ancestral home of the Starks, a swirl of memories in his mind. Ned, Robb, Rickon, the training yard, the feast hall, the crypts. All gone. All changed. And so was he. They made the journey back south in better weather, the ice melting into slush. On the way, they stopped at small holdfasts where Jon listened to the concerns of local lords. Bandits plagued the roads. Crops had failed in certain areas. The war had left scars that might take a generation to heal. But everywhere they went, people noticed how the new king traveled with minimal pomp, how he listened with genuine concern. Some knelt, some merely bowed. Some pressed small gifts, a loaf of bread, a wooden carving, for their new king, hoping for a blessing. Jon tried to tell them he wasn't a god nor someone to worship. But he accepted their gifts with humble thanks, aware that refusing would wound their pride. He offered small reassurances where he could. Roads would be made safer, the next harvest would be supported by the crown's treasury. He could only hope that these promises would bear fruit. When he reached King's Landing, the city seemed marginally better than when he had left. The main gates were being rebuilt, scaffolds rising around the charred remains of walls. The distribution of bread and stew continued in the lower districts, though resources were thin. Tyrion greeted Jon at the Red Keep, looking as though he had scarcely slept. "Welcome back," Tyrion said. "We have much to discuss." Jon sighed. "We always do." Tyrion led him to the council chamber, where Davos, Sam, Gendry, and a few new faces waited. Charts of trade routes, royal finances, and city reconstruction plans littered the table. Tyrion pointed to them, his tone brisk. "We've made progress, but there are troubles. Pirates near the Stepstones are raiding merchant ships. The lords in the Stormlands want more crown funds to rebuild after the war. Dorne has yet to formally recognize you, though they haven't openly defied you either. They're apparently selecting a new ruling house. And the Iron Islands are pressing for more autonomy as Yara demanded. We must handle them diplomatically or risk them flaring up in revolt." Jon said heavily, running a hand through his hair. "All right, we'll address each in turn." Davos spoke next, pointing at a map. "First, we can't afford a royal navy large enough to patrol all the seas. We must rely on alliances. Perhaps we can broker a deal with the Iron Islanders. If they help guard the coast from pirates, we can grant them certain trade privileges or autonomy concessions." Sam added, "We also should consider re-establishing Maester outposts in the major ports, so we have accurate knowledge of what's happening at sea. Communication will be key." Gendry chimed in, "Storm's End can help build a fleet if we get enough wood from the Reach or Riverlands. But it'll take time. The realm is still reeling from the war." Jon listened, mind spinning with the complexities. This was the real work of ruling, no battles in open fields, no glorious charges, but constant, grinding decisions that shaped the daily lives of thousands. He was a soldier, not a statesman, yet here he was. He forced himself to focus, to think carefully, to lean on the counsel of those around him. So it went, meeting after meeting, day after day. The realm slowly started to knit itself back together, or so Jon hoped. He faced endless challenges, rebellious vassals, shattered roads, half-empty treasuries, hungry masses. Yet each time despair threatened to overwhelm him, he reminded himself of the vow he'd made. To do his duty for the realm. To atone for the blood he'd shed. From time to time, he would wander outside the Red Keep at dusk, remembering the child cowering behind the cart. He'd see orphans being shepherded to shelters, courtesy of some of the new laws he'd enacted requiring the city to care for displaced children. He'd see the progress on city walls, the rubble cleared away to be replaced by new stone. The city still bore scars, but it was not beyond hope. That alone gave him the strength to continue. Sometimes he dreamed of Daenerys. Standing before him, her eyes full of tears, asking why he had betrayed her. Sometimes he dreamed of standing alone in the snow, the gates of Castle Black looming before him, silent and empty. But in the day, he pushed those nightmares aside and shouldered the tasks at hand. One step at a time, a friend had once told him. That's how you go on. Eventually, as months turned into the first year of his reign, a new normal settled over Westeros. The crown brokered peace with Dorne's newly installed leadership. The Iron Islands tested the waters of near independence but refrained from outright rebellion after forging trade agreements. The Stormlands and the Reach worked together to restore farmland and exchange supplies. The North, while proud and occasionally prickly, remained loyal thanks to Sansa's skillful leadership and the goodwill Jon had built. In King's Landing, the orphan crisis improved as funds were funneled into building communal homes and employing tradesmen to repair the city's infrastructure. Tyrion's negotiations with various banks, Braavosi and otherwise, brought in loans that fueled reconstruction. Davos oversaw the formation of a modest but efficient royal fleet to police the coasts. Sam Tarly organized a new system for maesters to travel among the lords, re-establishing knowledge networks. Gendry's forging prowess, combined with other blacksmiths, provided tools for farmers, masons, and more. The realm was far from perfect, but it began to heal slowly. Jon remained haunted by the sense that every gain was fragile, that at any moment new conflicts could erupt. Yet with each passing day, the flames of war receded further into memory. Children born after the war knew only stories of dragons scorching the city, of the dead rising in the north. They knew the name of King Jon, the reluctant ruler with a glower like winter's end, whose dire wolf prowled the halls at night. They heard tales of a king who walked among commoners, who carried guilt in his eyes, and who, by all accounts, had little taste for gold or grandeur. And so the realm took on a new shape, guided by a man whose only real desire was to see it safe. Some whispered that this was the best kind of king, one who bore no illusions of his own greatness. Others whispered that it was only a matter of time before Targaryen blood revealed its madness. But madness never came, only that quiet sorrow that lingered in Jon's gaze. He kept Daenerys's memory alive by honoring the freedmen's charters she had introduced, ensuring that slavery would never again take root in the realm or any allied territory. He set up a council of free folk, former slaves from Essos who had followed Daenerys across the sea, giving them a voice in the new era. It was an unprecedented move, met with some derision from old lords, but Jon stood firm. If there was to be a better world, then the once voiceless must be heard. And so time passed, season by season. The snows came and went. The scars in the city grew fainter, though they never vanished completely. The wheel Daenerys had wanted to break was not so easily shattered, but perhaps it was being reshaped. Politics remained politics, yet a measure of mercy crept into the laws. People whispered that under King Jon, punishments were seldom cruel and seldom inflicted without deep thought. Even a traitorous lord was usually given a chance to bend the knee or stand trial rather than face immediate execution. Some claimed that was weakness. Others claimed it was wisdom. Jon, for his part, cared little for the talk. He rose each morning with the same heavy heart, determined to do his duty. He was no shining hero. His nightmares rarely abated. But the realm no longer bled freely from every corner. Peace, a tenuous peace, but peace nonetheless stretched across the land. On the anniversary of his coronation, he stood on a rebuilt balcony looking over a city that was no longer smoldering but lit with lanterns, lively music drifting upward. Ghost sat at his side, tail thumping. Tyrion joined him, holding 2 cups of wine, offering one to Jon. "To another year, your grace," Tyrion said, raising his cup. "May it bring more joys than sorrows." Jon raised his cup in return, though he only sipped. He had never been one to indulge heavily in drink. "Thank you, Tyrion," he said quietly. "For everything." Tyrion inclined his head, then ventured a small smile. "Well, if you truly want to thank me, you can give me a vacation in Dorne. Gods know I could use some sun." Jon let out a soft chuckle, a rare sound. "Perhaps soon," he said. Then he gazed out over the city again. "We're not done yet." "No," Tyrion agreed, following his gaze. "But we're on a better path." Jon nodded. In the distance, he imagined Daenerys' silhouette glimpsed on a tower with Drogon perched above. He imagined her voice speaking of how she wanted to free the world from tyranny. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over him. He had not fulfilled her vision exactly as she would have. But maybe in some small way, her dream lived on. A world without chains, without devastation, without the madness of absolute power. Bit by bit, the realm was forging a different destiny. He opened his eyes, letting the breeze ruffle his hair. The city breathed beneath them, vibrant with life, stubborn in its will to endure. Jon placed a hand on Ghost's head, feeling the direwolf's steadfast presence. Yes, the realm endured, and so would he, carrying both the weight of the crown and the memory of what it had cost him to wear it. He was king now. And, God's help him, he would strive every day to be worthy of that burden. The city still murmured with life beneath him, every alley and byway humming with quiet industry as Jon finally turned from the balcony and re-entered his private chambers. The moment he did, Ghost rose from the hearth, massive paws stretching forward, tail giving a solitary thump against the floor. Jon bent to scratch behind the direwolf's ears, then straightened with a tired sigh. His bedchamber, though refurbished, remained spare. No tapestries of grandeur, no lavish bedstead of carved gold. He had insisted on simplicity, preferring only a plain table of dark wood, a trunk for his clothes, and a single tapestry depicting the Stark direwolf and Targaryen dragon entwined in a spiral design that Sam had commissioned from a local artisan. The tapestry was the only concession to symbol that Jon had allowed, and even that had been at Tyrion's gentle urging. Let the people see that the houses have united, rather than devoured each other. He removed the circlet of Valyrian steel from his head, feeling the lightness of his hair without it. The circlet always felt colder than expected, as if some magic still clung to the metal. He set it on the table with a faint clink. Ghost let out a low, rumbling sound in his throat, and John murmured, "All's well," though he wasn't sure if he believed it. The day had been filled with meetings about the city's sewers, whether they might be repaired to improve public health, and discussions on a scheme to encourage farmland redevelopment in the Crownlands. Not glamorous work, but necessary. He forced himself to strip off his outer garments and slip into bed. Sleep beckoned, though he half expected the nightmares that so often came when he closed his eyes. That night, however, the ghosts of Daenerys and the war receded into a dull hush, replaced by a dream of a forest blanketed in snow. At its center stood a lone weirwood, and in its branches perched a giant raven with eyes of molten gold. He heard the faint sound of his own name drifting on the wind. But when he took a step forward, the raven spread its wings and vanished into the sky, leaving John alone with only the hush of falling snow. He woke with dawn's first light, uncertain whether the dream was from the old gods or simply his own restless mind conjuring images of home. He rose, prepared for the new day, and found that Tyrion had already left a small stack of fresh missives on the long table near the hearth. John broke his fast on day-old bread and a cup of watered wine while he read through them. One letter bore the seal of Dorne's new ruling family. House Euler and House Dane had come to some arrangement for a regency until the next line of Martell relations was formally identified or chosen. The letter politely declared loyalty to John's reign, while also requesting more autonomy in local governance. Another letter came from Yara Greyjoy, reaffirming that the Iron Islands would abide by their agreement. In exchange for partial autonomy and rights to self-govern, they would patrol shipping lanes in the Sunset Sea to keep pirate raiders at bay. John exhaled in mild relief. These were small steps forward. The realm might still be fragile, but it was not splintering at every turn. He set aside the letters and pushed away from the table. Ghost loped behind him as he made his way to the council chamber. The corridors of the Red Keep, once so tarnished by the final battle's violence, were now cleared of rubble. New draperies hung on the walls, nothing ornate, but enough to mask the worst of the scorch marks. Servants in plain livery bowed as John passed, though he kept his gaze resolutely ahead, never quite comfortable with their deference. Outside the council chamber, 2 gold cloaks stood at attention. One stepped forward, about to announce him, but John only nodded and pushed open the heavy wooden door himself. Inside, he found Tyrion, Davos, and Sam already clustered around a large table strewn with parchment. They each glanced up, offering quiet greetings. Davos gave a respectful nod, Tyrion a small wry smile, and Sam an enthusiastic if weary grin. The 4th seat was vacant as the new Master of Laws, one Lord Celtigar, a once minor noble from Cracklaw Point who had proven himself capable, had not yet arrived. John settled into his chair, Ghost curling up at his feet. Tyrion gestured to the parchments. "We've new concerns from the Vale, Your Grace. It seems there's a band of Sellswords drifting through the foothills, harassing travelers. The Vale's regent, Lord Royce, requests men to help patrol." John glanced at the list, frowning. The Vale has enough forces of its own. Unless there's reason to believe these Sellswords are part of a larger conspiracy, I'd prefer the Vale handle the problem on their own. We can offer gold for supplies if they need it, but the Crown's men are already stretched thin. Sam spoke up, adjusting the quill behind his ear. It might be wise, though, to send a small contingent, if only to show we're serious about maintaining security throughout the realm. Sometimes a symbolic gesture can be enough to discourage more troublemakers. Davos grunted in agreement. "I'd say a few squads of well-trained men might do more than gold. Let them see the Crown's presence. Besides, we can't have outlaws running rampant so soon after the war. People are looking for reasons to lose faith in stability." John rubbed his jaw, recalling the hungry eyes of refugees who'd come to King's Landing from the Vale months ago. "Very well," he said at last. "We'll dispatch a single company of about 50 men to aid Lord Royce, with instructions that they remain in a supporting role. I don't want them embroiled in local disputes beyond dealing with these Sellswords." Tyrion, arrange the funding. Sam, draft the official orders. Tyrion scribbled a note in his ledger. Sam reached for parchment, and Davos gave a satisfied nod. The small matter seemed resolved for now. Lord Celtigar slipped in moments later, bowing in apology. He'd been delayed by an argument with a few local lords about an inheritance dispute. Jon suppressed a sigh, motioning the man to sit. Next, they discussed the ongoing efforts in the city. Fresh water supply, the distribution of bread, the reorganization of the city watch. Tyrion wanted to rename them, but the public had grown accustomed to calling them the Gold Cloaks, and so the notion was set aside. Davos explained how he had overseen the partial repair of the harbor, though much remained to be done to accommodate the new shipping that might arrive from Essos. Gendry, though not present, had sent word that the forges in Flea Bottom were at last producing at capacity, turning out new nails, tools, and building implements. Still, the biggest concern was coin. War had drained the treasury repeatedly. Even with Braavosi loans, they had to be vigilant about overspending. By midday, the council had decided on a plan to impose a modest tariff on luxury imports while leaving essentials like grain untaxed. The move was bound to irritate wealthy merchants, but it would raise needed funds to continue reconstruction. Jon listened carefully to Tyrion's justification, to Davos's cautionary advice that they might push trade away if tariffs became too high. Sam suggested a tiered approach. Eventually, a compromise was reached, a certain percentage of duty on silks, spices, and wines above a specified value. Enough to fill the coffers without strangling commerce. When the meeting finally ended, Jon excused himself, stepping outside. The corridor was empty save for a few servants hurrying by with laundry baskets. He raked a hand through his hair, overwhelmed by the intricacies of ruling. Battles against the undead or unscrupulous tyrants at least had clear lines. You fought or you died. Politics, in comparison, felt like wrestling a many-limbed beast. He missed the stark simplicity of the North's white expanses, huddling around a fire with his brothers of the Night's Watch, telling stories to keep the cold at bay. But that life was gone, replaced by a crown of hammered steel and endless responsibility. He decided to check on the quiet gardens Tyrion had recommended he visit when burdened by the daily grind. These gardens were new, planted in a once-burned courtyard near the southern wall where the ground had cooled from Daenerys' attack. A handful of dedicated gardeners had coaxed life back into the blackened soil, planting hardy shrubs and herbs. Jon walked there, alone save for Ghost, and found to his faint surprise that the garden was not empty. Brienne of Tarth stood among the rows of green, gently touching a cluster of pale pink blossoms. She turned at his approach, offering a slight bow. "Your Grace," she said. Jon inclined his head. "Sir Brienne," he replied, though he knew she was properly called a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, now recognized for her valor. It still felt strange to him calling her Sir, but he respected her skill and honor. "I didn't expect to see you here." She brushed her palm over the blossoms carefully as though worried she might harm them. "I was told these were the only flowers that grow here now. They're quite resilient." The gardeners said they were once known to flourish in the worst soils. Jon studied the delicate petals. "Resilient," he echoed. "The city needs more of that." She nodded. "The entire realm does." She glanced at Ghost, who padded forward to sniff around the base of the shrubs. "I came to speak with you if you have a moment." "Of course," Jon said, crossing his arms as he shifted his weight. "Is this about Sansa?" Brienne's serene gaze flickered. "In part. She remains well in Winterfell, continuing to strengthen the North's defenses. She's asked me to convey letters when I next travel north. But I came to speak about another matter." Jon wondered if it was about the knighthood or her vow to protect the Stark girls. He waited patiently, letting the hush of the courtyard envelop them. Brienne drew a breath. "I've had word from Podrick. He's been coordinating with your Master of Laws, traveling across certain districts to keep order. He told me there have been rumors, troubling ones, about a group of Sellswords in Essos calling themselves the Remnants of the Queen." Jon tensed. Remnants of the Queen? He thought of Daenerys at once, of Grey Worm's departure, of the Unsullied who had sailed for Noth. "What do we know?" Brienne's expression grew carefully neutral. "Not much, only that they are rumored to be mercenaries who once followed Daenerys. Perhaps some of the Dothraki who stayed behind in Essos, or freedmen who lost faith after her death. The rumors say they blame you for betraying their queen." A chill lanced through Jon, recalling Grey Worm's burning stare in the dragon pit. "I see. Do they plan to cross the sea?" "Podrick says it's not certain. But if they do, they might seek to stir trouble or exact vengeance. I thought you should know." Jon paced a few steps, Ghost trailing after him, ears pricked. Thank you, Brienne. I'll raise it with Tyrion. We can't afford to ignore any threats, no matter how distant. She inclined her head. I've sworn to protect House Stark. That extends to you as well, Your Grace. He offered a faint, grateful nod, though inside he felt a wave of weariness. Another potential threat, another shadow of the past. It seemed he would never be free of the consequences of Daenerys' death. As if reading his thought, Brienne said, You did what you had to do, Jon. Remember that. He tried to give her a small smile, but it felt tight. I recall that every day, he said. And every day I pray it was the right choice for the realm. She regarded him a moment longer as though seeing the weight on his shoulders. Then she bowed again and departed, leaving him amid the quiet garden. Jon drew in a breath, letting the faint scent of blossoms fill his lungs. In the hush, he sensed the ghosts that clung to him, intangible but unrelenting. He closed his eyes, recalling Bran's words, Some paths lead to deeper horrors if you weren't on the throne. Perhaps so. Yet no matter which path was taken, some horrors remained. He left the garden soon after, giving instructions that a discreet watch be placed on any new arrivals from Essos. He also wrote a short message for Gendry to see if his port agents had heard rumors of Sel's-Words docking in the Stormlands or the Crownlands. Then he buried himself in more tasks, hoping the threat never materialized. But the realm had taught him that ignoring a threat was the surest way to let it fester. They would remain vigilant. Over the next weeks, life in King's Landing trudged on. By day, the streets bustled with hawkers selling fresh produce from wagons, cabbages, turnips, meager bits of fruit. Carpenters hammered away at scaffolds and stonemasons chiseled new facades for once ruined shops. The city guard patrolled, fewer in number than in years past, but more disciplined thanks to new leadership. At night, the taverns and inns flickered with candlelight, and the folks who once cowered in fear of dragonfire now worried about more ordinary troubles, scraping together coin for rent or fending off petty thieves. The monarchy became less a looming specter and more a distant presence that occasionally dispensed justice or handed down laws. Jon spent those nights largely alone, aside from Ghost's company or a late-night discussion with Tyrion. The new King's Hand had thrown himself into the role with an almost manic energy, perhaps out of guilt for how Daenerys' reign had ended. Jon sometimes had to urge him to rest, and Tyrion would wave a dismissive hand, insisting there was no time. If Jon was not careful, he suspected Tyrion might work himself to an early grave. But Tyrion's guidance remained invaluable, especially when it came to navigating the old houses that still bristled at Targaryen rule. One evening, a raven arrived bearing the seal of House Arryn. It was from Robin Arryn, the Lord of the Eyrie, still something of a boy in many ways, though older now than when last they met in the Dragon Pit. He wrote in a shaky, uncertain hand that he had decided to come to King's Landing to pay homage, and that he hoped to discuss a marriage alliance. His own. Jon blinked at the letter in mild surprise. He passed it to Tyrion, who raised his brows. Seems the boy lord has grown, or fancies that he has, Tyrion said. I wonder which house he aims to wed. He says only that he wants to secure the Vale's future. A secret love interest, perhaps? Or an opportunistic venture? Jon considered the idea. He recalled Robin's sickly frame, his petulant ways as a child. But the wars had changed many people. Perhaps Robin had grown into some measure of responsibility. We'll host him, Jon said, and see what he wants. About a fortnight later, Robin Arryn arrived with a small retinue at the gates of King's Landing. They came in half a dozen carriages, a splash of color along the dusty road. Standing in the courtyard to greet him, Jon observed that Robin had indeed changed. He was taller, though still slender, with hair the color of chestnut. He looked pale but not as sickly, and while a certain arrogance still shone in his eyes, he had the tentative politeness of someone trying to be adult. They exchanged formal greetings, and Jon led him into the Red Keep's outer ward. Robin's voice trembled slightly with excitement as he said, Your Grace, it's an honor to stand here in peacetime. The Vale is, well, thriving. We're grateful for your leadership in uniting the realm. Jon offered a nod, leading him to a chamber prepared for his stay. I'm glad the Vale has found stability, he said, voice carefully neutral. You wish to discuss marriage? Robin's cheeks colored a bit, but he lifted his chin. Yes, I'm at an age now where my advisors and I agree that forging a strong alliance is key. The Vale has been somewhat removed from the main conflicts, but we remain loyal to the crown. We thought it would be wise to strengthen that bond. He paused, as though hunting for the right words. "We propose, if you might consider, well, if you had a suitable noblewoman in mind for me, or if the realm would arrange something beneficial. I know your sisters." He trailed off, recalling that Arya was gone and Sansa was the Lady of Winterfell, a woman of considerable autonomy. Jon eyed him in silence for a moment. "Sansa will not leave the north," he said quietly. "Nor would she, but there are other families. I'm sure Tyrion can recommend some possible alliances. The houses of the Reach, or perhaps Dorne, might be open." Robin nodded, looking both relieved and nervous. Yes, of course. I just wanted to ensure you knew I come in goodwill." Jon led him through the corridor, feeling a flicker of pity for the boy lord, who was now expected to shape the fate of the Vale with a marriage. It reminded him how so much of Westerosi politics revolved around bloodlines. He had once been dismissed as a bastard, unworthy of any alliance, yet now he was king. The notion still felt surreal. Over the next few days, Tyrion indeed compiled a list of eligible highborn ladies, daughters of lords who might welcome a marriage alliance with the Vale. Robin, wide-eyed at the parade of names, confided privately to Jon that he hadn't expected so many options. Jon, unaccustomed to playing matchmaker, merely instructed Tyrion to handle the details. In the midst of these marriage negotiations, news arrived from the Iron Islands. A minor raid had been repelled by Yara's forces, pirates who claimed to be allied with the so-called remnants of the Queen. Yara's letter was terse, describing a skirmish at sea in which a handful of ships attacked a trading vessel from Westeros. The Ironborn overcame them, took prisoners, and found they were indeed men who once called themselves freedmen under Daenerys. They had taken to piracy, blaming the new monarchy for her death and swearing vengeance. Yara had executed a few of the ringleaders, letting the rest go to spread word that if they dared such raids again, they'd face worse. Jon read the letter twice, dread coursing through him. He shared it with his council. Davos scowled. Sam frowned deeply. Tyrion paced. "We can't let them terrorize the seas," Davos said. "If the Ironborn alone stand against them, we may contain it. But if they gather enough ships, they'll be a thorn in our side for years." Jon nodded. "We'll coordinate with Yara. I want to prevent a full-blown conflict, but we can't appear weak." He ran a hand over his hair, remembering how easily war flares from smaller sparks. "Inform Yara we'll provide coin to bolster her navy if needed." "Tyrion, do we have funds for that?" Tyrion shrugged. "We can divert from the city reconstruction budget if we must, though it'll slow progress. Unless we raise new taxes." "No," Jon cut in firmly. "The city has suffered enough. Let's see if we can find another way. Maybe we can ask the new Prince of Dorne or the Lords of the Reach to contribute. They have an interest in stable trade routes too." They agreed to send envoys to the major houses, requesting financial or naval support in maintaining maritime security. Jon felt a familiar heaviness, one problem after another, each demanding a delicate solution. The remnants of the Queen haunted him like a specter of guilt, reminding him of the cost of his decision. Though he knew, logically, that Daenerys' unwavering wrath had left him no choice, the personal burden lingered. One evening, as he retired to his chambers, he found Grey Worm waiting for him in the corridor, except it couldn't be Grey Worm, for Grey Worm had sailed long ago. Jon blinked, heart jolting, until he realized it was a man who resembled the unsullied commander only in stance. Shaved head, upright posture, eyes forward. Yet the uniform was different. This was a messenger from Essos, wearing plain leathers. He bowed quickly. "Your Grace," the man said in lightly accented common tongue. "I bring a letter from Noth." Jon's brow knitted. "From Noth? Let me see it." The messenger withdrew a sealed parchment, the wax bearing no familiar sigil. Jon broke it open, scanning the scrawled lines. The letter was from Grey Worm himself. Short, direct. It said that the Unsullied had settled in Noth as they had long planned, seeking to protect the peaceful inhabitants from slavers who might prey upon them. But rumors of turmoil in Westeros had reached them, carried by travelers and roving cells words who crossed the sea. Grey Worm wrote that he harbored no love for the one who had killed his queen, but he had no desire to return to Westeros or wage another war. He only wished to warn Jon that some of Daenerys's former followers in Essos were gathering under new banners, spurred by men who spread twisted tales of betrayal. I do not fight for you, Grey Worm wrote bluntly, but I will not fight against you either. I seek only peace for the people of Noth. This letter is my only courtesy in memory of Missandei, who believed you to be an honorable man. Jon let the parchment slip to the table. The messenger stood quietly. Ghost, at Jon's side, let out a faint huff as though sensing tension. Jon stared at the neat, blunt words. Grey Worm had chosen not to mention Daenerys by name, or perhaps he could not bear to. The letter made it clear he would not stand with these new rebels, nor would he help quell them. The Unsullied were done with Westeros. Yet the warning was clear enough. More of these so-called remnants existed in Essos, and they might eventually cross the sea in greater force. Jon took a slow breath. Thank you, he said to the messenger. You may remain in King's Landing for a few days if you wish. My steward will see that you're fed and given a bed. Then return to Noth with my reply. He penned a short, measured response, acknowledging Grey Worm's position, expressing a hope for peace, and stating that if the Unsullied wished to remain in Noth, the crown would not interfere. He ended with a quiet note of gratitude that Grey Worm had bothered to send a warning at all. It was more courtesy than Jon ever expected after what had transpired. In the days that followed, news of Essos and these scattered enemies trickled in, but no invasion force arrived. The remnants remained elusive, content, at least for the moment, to raid shipping lanes. Jon resolved to keep the realm vigilant, but he tried not to let paranoia poison the delicate rebuilding. As the second year of his reign neared its close, the city's scars had begun to fade, replaced by new structures, fresh trade, and a flicker of prosperity. At times, King's Landing almost resembled a city at peace. Winter fell away once more, turning into a mild spring. Blossoms flourished in the crownlands, the roads softened, the farmland began to yield greater harvests. Visitors poured in from across Westeros, lords paying homage, merchants seeking favor, common folk hoping the capital might offer them a new start. Jon found himself inundated with audiences, disputes, and requests. A lord from the Westerlands demanded compensation for past destruction by Daenerys's armies. An envoy from the Citadel sought to clarify new maester distribution. Tyrion handled much of it, yet Jon was still required to make final decisions on matters that bore heavy consequences. Then, one afternoon, Sansa arrived unexpectedly, traveling down from Winterfell without a large retinue. She had only a small group of Stark guards, plus Brienne, who had ridden north some weeks earlier and now returned with her. The news of her arrival reached Jon as he was finishing a meeting with Gendry in the council chamber. Jon left the table at once, striding through the halls toward the courtyard. There he found Sansa dismounting, the corners of her lips tugging into a soft smile when she saw him. She wore a dark cloak of thick northern fabric, her hair pinned back in an intricate braid. He embraced her, ignoring the watchers. Sansa, he said, voice warm, I wasn't expecting you so soon. She returned the embrace with a quiet laugh. The snows receded more quickly this year, and I had to come south to settle a trade agreement with the Reach. I thought I might as well come to the capital and see how you were faring. Jon guided her inside. She noted the repairs with approval. You've done wonders. The city looks almost inviting. He gave a wry half-smile. It's better than before. Still plenty to fix. But we're trying. They spoke of northern affairs as they walked to a small solar. Sansa had effectively created a new council in Winterfell composed of wise lords and ladies, plus maesters and a handful of common folk representatives. To better hear the needs of the land, she explained. It's new and some lords bristle at the notion of commoners having a say, but it's helped me avert crises. The north is not as large in population as the south, so hearing every voice is more manageable. And it fosters goodwill. Jon nodded, intrigued. That's an interesting approach. Perhaps we should do something similar here, though the scale would be enormous. You might start in smaller districts, Sansa offered, taking a seat. Perhaps each city ward could have a handful of representatives. Then they convene with the crown every few moons. It would relieve you from having to sift through countless petitions alone. Jon folded his arms, pacing. It's worth considering. We need a new structure, something to prevent the realm from relying too heavily on one person's whims. I saw what happened when all power funneled into Daenerys. I don't want to repeat that. She watched him with quiet admiration. You truly are forging a different kind of reign, Jon. He hesitated, feeling the old pang of guilt. I'm trying. I still wonder if someone else could do it better. Her brows creased. I doubt it. Others might talk of grand ideas, but you act upon them. The realm is healing, that's plain enough to see. And it helps that you care more for the people than for your own glory. He dipped his head in thanks, though he felt unworthy of praise. Is Arya well? He asked, voice hushed. A faint shadow crossed Sansa's face. I've had one raven from her since she left Westeros. She wrote that she sailed west for many days, discovered islands unknown to her maps, and kept going. But she's alive, or was at the time of writing. She said not to expect frequent messages, the seas are too vast. But she sounded content in her own way. Jon's chest tightened. I'm glad for her, though I miss her. He recalled the day she rode away from Winterfell, that final wave goodbye. Sansa touched his arm gently. She's doing what she must. We all are. They parted ways for the evening, Sansa retiring to the chambers prepared for her. Jon returned to his duties, heart lighter for having family close. Over the next days, Sansa participated in council meetings, offering her perspective on trade with the North and the possibility of the crown forging more localized councils. She impressed even Tyrion with her measured, incisive thoughts. The only lord who seemed unsettled was Lord Celtigar, who found the notion of empowering common folk a bit radical. But Sansa politely dismantled his concerns, pointing out how broader input might prevent rebellions that historically sprung from neglected grievances. Jon watched her speak and marveled at the transformation. The once naive girl had become a formidable leader in her own right. On the 5th day of her visit, a hush fell over the city as a grand entourage was spotted approaching from the south, a flamboyant procession bearing the sigil of House Tarly. Sam's father and brother had been executed by Daenerys for refusing to bend the knee, leaving Sam as the last legitimate Tarly. But Sam, by virtue of his vows to the Night's Watch and subsequent training as a maester, had never claimed Horn Hill. The estate had remained in flux. Now, distant Tarly cousins arrived, possibly seeking recognition or guidance on inheritance. Sam's face paled when he heard the news. He confided in Jon that he dreaded facing them. They might resent me, he whispered. I never wanted Horn Hill or the lordship, but if they believe I'm an obstacle. Jon placed a reassuring hand on Sam's shoulder. We'll handle it together. You're Grand Maester in training, not a lord. The crown can confirm them as the new lords of Horn Hill if that's your wish. But let's see what they say first. Sure enough, 2 men and a lady of House Tarly arrived at the Red Keep, flanked by a retinue of sworn swords. They carried themselves with pride, though tempered by caution. The men introduced themselves as Dennis and Garth Tarly, distant cousins of Randall Tarly, and the lady as Melara Tarly, Garth's younger sister. Dennis spoke for them. Your Grace, we come in peace, seeking only to restore Horn Hill to legitimate Tarly rule. We understand that our cousin Samwell now serves as your maester. We wish no ill will toward him, only the proper passing of titles. Jon, seated in the lesser throne room where official audiences took place, nodded calmly. Samwell has no intention of claiming Horn Hill. As far as we are concerned, if you can prove your lineage, the estate is yours. Dennis bowed, relief evident. Thank you, Your Grace. We bear the genealogical records and the maesters can confirm. We only regret how Randall and Dickon Tarly met their end. Jon's jaw tightened, recalling how Daenerys burned them alive. He had witnessed that gruesome spectacle, powerless to intervene. We all regret it, he said quietly. There's no bringing them back, but at least House Tarly will endure. Sam observed from the sidelines, wearing his plain maester's robes, a swirl of emotions in his eyes. Melara Tarly approached him after the formal audience, offering a cautious smile. Samwell, she said softly. I never met you, but I heard you left to join the Night's Watch. I'm sorry for all you endured. Sam cleared his throat, clearly anxious. Thank you. I'm sorry for the tragedy that befell our house. Father was a hard man, but I never wanted him or my brother to die. She bowed her head. Nor did we. Still, I hope we can move forward. Horn Hill needs stability, and you have your own calling here in the capital. Sam nodded, glancing at Jon, who gave him a supportive nod. It seemed that, for once, a painful family matter might be resolved without violence. The Tarly cousins spent the next week in the city, verifying documents with the help of the crown's scribes and Sam's own records from the Citadel. In the end, the inheritance was formally granted to Dennis Tarly, who pledged fealty to King Jon. They parted on amicable terms, though Sam remained somewhat haunted by the memory of his father's rigid disapproval. Just as that matter settled, another wave of letters arrived, this time from the Stormlands. Gendry had encountered a group of suspicious mercenaries lurking in a coastal village, claiming to be merchants. Upon closer inspection, they bore tattoos of a winged dragon skull, which some believed was a sign used by extremist loyalists to the old Targaryen line. Gendry reported chasing them off, but not before they attacked 2 local guards. They escaped by sea, leaving behind a single captive who refused to speak. In Gendry's letter, he expressed worry that these men might be connected to the remnants of the queen. As Jon read, dread unfurled in his gut. He rose from his seat, hurrying to find Tyrion in the library where the Hand often consulted trade manifests. Tyrion looked up from a stack of parchments with bleary eyes. "Yes, your grace." Jon handed him Gendry's letter. Tyrion perused it, lips thinning. "A winged dragon skull?" he murmured. "I've not heard of that particular emblem. But it could be some new design, a statement of rebellious identity." "So they're infiltrating the Stormlands now?" Jon exhaled. "It seems so. We have to address this head-on. If these mercenaries slip in and out unchecked, we could soon have a real insurgency on our hands." Tyrion nodded. "We might consider dispatching an investigative force. Men loyal to you, but discreet. If we send a large army, we might only provoke a bigger conflict." Jon pressed his hand against the table, leaning forward. "Agreed. We'll coordinate with Gendry. Have him watch the ports more closely, question travelers from Essos. I want no witch hunt, but we can't stand idle." Tyrion wasted no time drafting letters, coordinating with Davos to see which ships might be available for coastal patrol. Jon felt a familiar tension building in his chest. Peace was so tenuous, and the ghost of Daenerys' downfall cast a long shadow. He could almost hear her voice in his mind, that impassioned conviction that had once inspired so many. Even if she had veered into madness at the end, her earlier dream of breaking the wheel had attracted hundreds, thousands of followers who believed in her. Some still evidently believed, even now, enough to kill or die for her memory. In the midst of these clandestine threats, a glimmer of good news arrived, a letter from Dorne stating that the new ruler and elected cousin of the extinct Martell line had effectively stabilized the region, ensuring that caravans now traveled safely from Sunspear to King's Landing. This meant trade from the southern deserts would soon bolster the capital. Dates, spices, and even a few prized Dornish wines began flowing in. Tyrion joked, "At last, some decent drink," though the joke fell a bit flat given the mounting anxieties. While the realm juggled these new challenges, Sansa prepared to depart. She had completed her negotiations with the Lords of the Reach for expanded trade in the north. One afternoon, Jon joined her on a walk through the Red Keep's corridors, ghost padding along. They passed a mows. AIC of Targaryen dragons in the floor, a leftover from the old kings, and reached a small balcony overlooking the training yard. Below, a handful of new recruits practiced with wooden swords under the watchful eye of Ser Brienne, who drilled them in the fundamentals. Sansa leaned on the stone railing, eyes scanning the yard. "They're so young," she murmured, watching a lad who could be no older than 16, sweat dripping down his brow as he tried to hold the practiced sword steady. Jon nodded. Too many of the older fighters died in the wars. Now the City Watch recruits whoever they can train. Sansa's expression was pained. So much was lost. "It's a wonder we have anything left at all." He placed a hand over hers. "We do. And we're rebuilding. Thanks to your help and everyone who hasn't lost hope." She turned to face him fully. "I believe you'll hold the realm together, Jon. But promise me you'll not forget your own needs. You can't shoulder every weight alone." He managed a faint smile. "I have all of you, Tyrion, Davos, Sam. And you even from the north. I'm not alone." She studied him with a look that suggested she could see beneath the surface. "Even so, take care. This crown has cost you dearly already. I don't want you to lose what remains of yourself." He felt her words more deeply than he cared to admit. They walked on, passing tapestries of old conquests, the dusty hush of neglected hallways leading them eventually to a small courtyard where her retinue waited. Sansa embraced him again, leaving him with a sense of warmth and unease all at once. He hated to watch her go, but the North needed her more than ever. As she rode away, he silently wished her safe travels. Time rolled on. The second year of Jon's reign gave way to the third, and though the kingdom still trembled with undercurrents of conflict, it began to show signs of real renewal. A new generation of blacksmiths, stonemasons, and farmers found work under the crown's reconstruction projects. The city's population grew, with refugees finally returning from the countryside. Markets thrived in a way they hadn't since before the war. With each passing moon, a cautious optimism crept into the hearts of many. Yet the remnants of the queen lingered in the corners of Jon's thoughts. Gendry's occasional ravens described sporadic skirmishes along the coast. Yara Greyjoy wrote that her ships chased down a few pirate crews flying a black banner stamped with that menacing dragon skull. Sometimes they captured them, other times the remnants evaded pursuit. The cycle repeated, never erupting into a full-scale crisis, but never truly vanishing. Jon worried that they might be biding their time, gathering more strength. One crisp morning, Tyrion brought in a hooded man escorted by 2 gold cloaks. The man wore battered leathers and stank of sweat and salt, his hair matted. "Your Grace," Tyrion announced, "our friend here claims to have valuable information about these Dragonskull pirates. He was found drunk in a dockside tavern, boasting that he used to sail with them." Jon turned to the man, arms folded. "Speak," he said curtly. The man licked his chapped lips, eyes darting from side to side. I was part of a crew that followed a captain named Sarquo. He once fought in Daenerys's campaigns overseas. He lost everything when she died. Swore vengeance. We took to raiding the shipping lanes, but recently Sarquo's been talking bigger, bolder. Says we should raise an army, not just a few ships." Jon tensed. "Where's Sarquo now?" "Last I saw, he planned to make landfall in the Stormlands, near a place called Wraith Point Bay. Secret Cove, little fishing village. He's gathering men and arms, hoping to stir up enough trouble that the Targaryen king will have to pay attention. Then, well, no one knows what he plans, but it won't be good for your realm, that's for sure." Jon glanced at Tyrion, whose expression darkened. They'd heard rumors of small landings along the Stormlands coast, but nothing concrete. This testimony suggested the threat was more serious than isolated raids. Jon fixed the man with a steady gaze. "Why tell us this?" The man squirmed. "I saw some things that made me uneasy. Children taken, forced to row or haul cargo. Sarquo doesn't care who gets hurt, long as he gets his revenge. I can't abide that. I deserted. But I need coin, something to start fresh. You help me, I help you." Jon swallowed his revulsion. Kidnapping children for forced labor was a new low. His voice hardened. "You'll get a fair sum if your information leads to an actual capture of Sarquo and his men. But if you're lying," he let the threat hang in the air. The man quickly shook his head, insisting his words were true. They put the man under watch, and Jon summoned Davos, Gendry, and a half-dozen seasoned captains. Together, they devised a plan. Gendry would lead a small force of loyal Stormlanders to Wraith Point Bay, accompanied by some of the Royal Guard. If Sarquo was indeed there, they would attempt to surround him by land and sea. Davos volunteered to sail along the coast to cut off any escape by water using a swift ship crewed by men he trusted. Jon weighed whether to join them personally. His instincts as a warrior demanded it, yet the realm's stability hinged on his remaining alive and in power. Tyrion argued for caution. "Send your best men, but not yourself. If you fall into a trap, the chaos that follows might unravel everything." Jon knew he was right. He ordered Gendry and Davos to depart within days, armed with enough soldiers to face a moderate threat but not so many as to raise suspicions. The day they left, the sky was overcast, the air thick with potential rain. Jon stood atop the Red Keep's walls, watching the line of soldiers and wagons snake toward the horizon. Ghost whined at his side. Jon laid a hand on the direwolf's head. "I should be with them," he muttered, guilt twisting inside. Tyrion's voice came from behind. "I doubt they'd appreciate you risking your neck so carelessly. They need a king to return to, after all." Jon didn't reply, only stared after the departing men. In the quiet that followed, he recalled the old days when he'd have been at the forefront of any dangerous mission. Now he had to remain behind, bound by the crown. It felt like wearing invisible chains. At last, he turned away, heading down the stairs to bury himself in more governance, a fresh round of petitions about farmland disputes, a tedious meeting on the upcoming harvest festival meant to celebrate the realm's new unity. For an instant, he longed for the relative simplicity of the wall. Days crept by with no word. Tyrion tried to keep Jon's mind occupied with other matters, but tension hung in the air. Sellsword troubles flared in the Vale again, requiring more of the crown's attention. And Robin Arryn, who had lingered in King's Landing for months awaiting a marriage arrangement, finally chose a match with a younger daughter of House Redwyne from the Reach. The negotiations took place with a flurry of formalities, leaving the boy lord both excited and overwhelmed. Jon found little time or heart to celebrate these alliances, consumed by worry for Gendry and Davos. At last, a raven arrived from Gendry, delivered late in the evening. Jon tore it open in the presence of Tyrion and Sam. The note read, "We found Sarquo. He is more formidable than expected, has at least 3 ships hidden in the cove, plus a camp of near 200 men. We engaged in a skirmish. Davos's ship blockaded the bay, so they could not flee easily. Many were captured, but Sarquo escaped inland with a handful of loyal fighters. We pursue. Several children freed, some battered, but alive. We press on. We'll report more soon." Jon let out a breath. 200 mercenaries was no small threat. Sarquo's escape inland worried him. The Stormlands terrain could be treacherous, full of dense forests and rocky hills. Gendry was as brave as any man, but if Sarquo rallied more support, the situation could sour. Jon paced, reading the note again. At least they had freed children from captivity, and Davos had done well blockading the bay. Still, the fact that Sarquo evaded capture gnawed at him. Word arrived a day later that Gendry and Davos had cornered Sarquo's band near an abandoned fortress deep in the Stormlands. Another skirmish broke out in which Gendry himself was wounded, though not grievously. Sarquo, outnumbered and trapped, finally yielded. Dozens of his men were killed in the fighting and the rest taken prisoner. Gendry's message arrived scrawled in a shaky hand, likely penned in haste. It's done. Sarquo is captured, along with his senior lieutenants. We will bring them to King's Landing for trial as your law commands. The children have been sent home to their families. Some speak of horrors that might sicken even the bravest knight. We'll see you soon. Relief washed over Jon, though tinged with anger at the cruelty Sarquo had inflicted. He prepared to receive the prisoners. Within a week, Gendry and Davos returned, the latter's hair even more streaked with silver than before. Gendry bore a bandage across his upper arm but smiled stoically, reporting that the operation was a success. King's Landing guards took custody of Sarquo and his surviving mercenaries, locking them in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep. Jon insisted on seeing Sarquo personally. He descended the winding steps with Tyrion, Davos, and a contingent of guards, ghost padding silently behind. In a dimly lit cell, they found a wiry man with tangled hair, one eye covered by a filthy bandage as though from a fresh wound. He gazed up at Jon with burning hatred. You, he hissed. Kinslayer. Usurper. You dare show your face. Jon stood just beyond the bars, expression impassive. If you mean Daenerys, she was my aunt. That hardly makes her my wife or sister to call me a kinslayer, but I doubt you care. You conspired to raid our shores, kidnapping children. For what? Sarquo spat. To draw you out, to force a confrontation. To avenge the queen. She freed me in Meereen. She taught me hope. Then you killed her. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the soft flicker of torchlight against stone. Jon's voice emerged low and cold. She would not have wanted you to harm innocent children. She wanted a new world, Sarquo snarled. We can't build a new world unless we tear down the old. We needed to show Westeros what real power looks like. We needed it. You needed cruelty to avenge cruelty, Jon interrupted, eyes hard. That's not how we move forward. You call me a murderer, but look at what you've done. He stepped back, forcing calm into his voice. You will stand trial for your crimes, judged by a panel of lords and advisors. Whatever your cause was, you've spilled blood and taken children hostage. Your men who remain loyal to you will also stand trial. Sarquo only glared, trembling with impotent rage. You can kill me, but you won't stop us, he hissed. Others still sail free. The Queen's spirit lives on in all of US who believed in her. Jon stared at him, a flicker of deep sorrow in his eyes. We can stop you if you only bring destruction, he said at last. And Daenerys' memory deserves better than the violence you use in her name. With that he turned, not waiting for Sarquo to hurl more accusations. The heavy iron door clanged shut behind him. In the corridor, Davos let out a breath. He's mad with zealotry. Tyrion grimaced. Reminds me of some of the worst fanatics I saw during the War of the Five Kings. He'll likely be sentenced to death or the Wall, though the Wall is a shell of its former self. Jon nodded. We'll convene a tribunal. Let everyone hear what he's done. Then let them decide. But these men who remain loyal to him keep a close watch. They might attempt to escape or cause further trouble. So it was arranged. A public trial was scheduled in the Great Hall. In the days leading up to it, word spread throughout King's Landing that the notorious pirate mercenary who claimed to fight for Queen Daenerys' vengeance would be judged. Crowds gathered, some curious, some furious at the atrocities. Jon prepared carefully. He wanted transparency so that no rumor would claim he executed Sarquo in secret to hide the truth. He intended to show that even a man who had threatened the realm would be given a fair trial, a significant departure from the summary executions of the past. The day of the trial arrived. The Great Hall was filled with lords, knights, city representatives, and onlookers of varying social standing. A dais held the high seat where Jon sat, crown upon his head, ghost at his side, a silent testament to the king's northern heritage. The floor was cleared for Sarquo to stand in chains, flanked by armed guards. He stared up at Jon with defiance burning in his good eye. Tyrion rose as the hand of the king, reading the charges: piracy, murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to incite rebellion. Witnesses came forward, freed children who tearfully recounted being taken from their families, a fisherman who had been forced at sword point to guide Sarquo's crew through the coves. Gendry testified to capturing Sarquo in the Stormlands. Davos described the battle at sea. Each testimony painted a picture of cruelty fueled by twisted devotion. When asked to respond, Sarquo spat accusations at Jon, at the lords of Westeros, at the crowd. He recounted how Daenerys had freed him from slavery in Essos, how she had broken the chains of countless others. She was the only true liberator, he cried. And you destroyed her. You turned on her, you who shared her bed and her blood. You betrayed her dreams. I kill in her name because the realm is too blind to see what it lost. An uneasy murmur rippled through the crowd. Jon listened with stoic composure, though his hands clenched on the arms of his seat. The memory of Daenerys' final moments weighed on him like a stone. Tyrion cleared his throat, asking calmly, "Are you saying that because you believe we lost a savior, you think it right to murder innocents and steal children?" Sarquo's face twisted. "I do what is necessary to shake the realm awake." Tyrion exhaled softly. "And that, lords and ladies, is the sum of his defense, that the ends justify any means. The crown does not believe so." Jon stood, crown catching torchlight. He gazed across the hall. "Those who follow this path of blood in Daenerys Targaryen's name dishonor all that she once stood for, freedom from oppression. She became lost in her final days, but she did not wage war to see children enslaved. Sarquo's crimes stand proven by multiple testimonies, by evidence undeniable. Let the lords assembled weigh the sentence. Death or the wall? Is there any voice that would speak in Sarquo's defense?" Silence stretched, thick with tension. A hush so complete that the crackle of torches sounded deafening. No one spoke for Sarquo, not even the handful of his men who had survived. Some had renounced him, cursing his name. No friend or ally stood forward. Sarquo only gave a bitter laugh, the sound hollow. After a moment, Tyrion turned to Jon. "Your Grace, as the highest authority, you may pronounce the sentence yourself or defer to the council's vote." Jon's mind churned. He thought of Ned Stark's lessons. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. But Ned also believed in mercy for those who might be redeemed. Could Sarquo be redeemed? After the horrors he had wrought, it seemed unlikely. He was a fanatic, a murderer, and he vowed only more destruction. The people of Westeros deserved peace from him. Yet the notion of taking another life for Daenerys' sake brought a swirl of torment in Jon's chest. Still, his father's voice echoed, this man was a killer. Justice had to be served. Jon's voice echoed over the silent hall. "Sarquo of Meereen, you stand condemned for piracy, murder, and kidnapping. By the power vested in me as king of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, I sentence you to death." A ripple of tension passed. Sarquo sneered, shaking his chains. "You kill me. You killed her. You kill Hope, Targaryen." His words rang out, but no one answered. The guards seized him, dragging him away to the dungeons. The hall erupted in low murmurs, the onlookers dispersing in subdued relief. Another threat ended, at least for now. Jon stood still, heart pounding as people bowed or curtsied, departing. Tyrion approached quietly. "We can arrange the execution in the yard, by beheading, if you wish to follow your father's tradition," Tyrion said gently. "Or we can have the headsman do it." Jon closed his eyes. He recalled the times he had carried out sentences himself when duty demanded. He was no stranger to an executioner's sword, but he also recalled how Daenerys had melted her enemies in dragonfire without hesitation. Perhaps a clean beheading was the lesser cruelty, though that hardly comforted him. "I will do it myself," he said at last. "Let it be done swiftly." The next morning, as the sun rose pale in the sky, a small gathering formed in the Red Keep's courtyard, city guards, a few noble observers, and the convicted criminals. The other mercenaries would be sent to the wall, but Sarquo was chosen for a public execution, both to serve as an example and because his crimes were deemed too heinous for mercy. Jon stood with Longclaw strapped to his hip, the Valyrian steel blade that had once been Jeor Mormont's. Ghost lingered at his side, hackles slightly raised as though sensing blood. Tyrion, Davos, and Sam watched from behind, their faces grim. Sarquo was brought forth in chains, forced to kneel on the dirt. A hush fell. Jon drew Longclaw, stepping forward. He met Sarquo's gaze one last time. The man's expression was twisted with hate, but beneath it, a flicker of despair. Jon remembered the vow he made upon accepting the crown, to do what was right for the realm, to bring justice without cruelty. His voice came steady though his heart pounded. "In the name of the realm and the laws of Westeros, I, Jon of House Targaryen and House Stark, do sentence you to die. May the gods have mercy on your soul." With a swift motion, he brought Longclaw down. The blade severed Sarquo's neck cleanly, a single stroke. Blood pooled, staining the ground. Ghost let out a low, keening sound. Jon lowered the sword, breathing hard, resisting the urge to shut his eyes against the sight. He felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. The watchers bowed or offered murmured words. The city guard removed the body. Tyrion placed a hand on Jon's shoulder, giving a slight squeeze of sympathy. Jon nodded once, sheathing Longclaw. The official deed was done, but he had no appetite for anything else that day. He retreated to his chamber, doffing the blood-stained cloak, wiping the sword meticulously. Ghost hovered near, as if to offer some wordless comfort. That night, he sat alone by the hearth, the fire crackling. He thought about the cycle of violence, how so many had died, from the War of the Five Kings to Daenerys' conquest, to the Great War against the dead, and finally to the sack of King's Landing. Now there were still pockets of chaos, men clinging to the idea of vengeance. He stared at the flames, remembering Daenerys' golden hair shimmering in the sunlight, her eyes fierce with conviction. If she could see me now, he thought, would she call me a butcher? Or would she understand? Silence answered him, broken only by the popping of embers. Eventually, he fell into a restless sleep. By dawn, the weight in his chest had dulled to a familiar burden, and he rose to face the day. The realm required him. The threat of Sarquo's band might be ended, but others could still lurk in the shadow. W.S. He could only keep forging ahead, one decision at a time, trusting that a measure of peace would slowly take root. As that third year of his reign wore on, the monarchy's new structures began to take shape. Tyrion and Sam helped draft charters for local councils in each region, a rudimentary form of representation. The lords grumbled, but many yielded when it became clear that including common voices actually helped quell unrest, improved the tax system, and fostered loyalty. Even the Iron Islands grudgingly adopted a smaller-scale version, with Yara presiding over a council of captains who debated local issues. Dorne, always proud and more independent, established a similar body. The realm was not close to a democracy in the modern sense, but it was a step away from absolute rule by a single monarch. Jon watched these developments with cautious optimism. He hoped that by building institutions stronger than any one person, the realm might avert another disaster like the Mad King or the Mad Queen. Yet he also recognized how fragile these changes were. The old lords still held power, and many disliked sharing it, even in small ways. If the monarchy lost the trust of the people, these councils might fragment. So he worked tirelessly to maintain balance. He listened to every voice that came to his court, from high-born ladies to poor farmers, trying to show that this new monarchy truly cared. Meanwhile, rumors about the remnants of the queen faded somewhat. With Sarquo dead, no single figure stepped up to unify them. The scattered groups continued their raids in Essos, but rarely ventured near Westeros. A few, it was said, tried to rouse support among the Dothraki Khalasars, but the Dothraki had returned to their traditional ways, uninterested in avenging a queen they barely followed after her demise. Grey Worm and the Unsullied in Noth kept mostly to themselves. And so that threat, while never fully extinguished, smoldered in the distance rather than erupting anew. On a late summer afternoon, Jon found himself standing on the refurbished walls of the Red Keep, gazing at the rolling hills beyond the city. The sky was a deep, cloudless blue, the sun bright. A mild wind ruffled his hair. He could smell the faint tang of the sea drifting from Blackwater Bay. The city below was alive with color, market stalls displaying fabrics and produce, the calls of peddlers mixing with the ring of blacksmith hammers. It was no paradise, but it was better than the ash-strewn ruin he had first ruled over. Children played in the streets without constant fear. Merchants hawked goods with smiles instead of terror. In the distance, half-built towers rose where once there had been only rubble. Ghost stood beside him, nose lifted to the breeze. Jon couldn't help but feel a stir of hope. Perhaps the realm could find a lasting peace after all. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Sam, wearing a shortened maester's chain. He had forged enough links for the Citadel to grant him official status, though he was still not an aged archmaester. Sam joined Jon at the wall, following his gaze over the city. "You've done well," Sam said quietly. "I don't think the people realize how close everything came to collapsing entirely." Jon shrugged. "I had helped yours, Tyrion's, Davos's, and many more. It's not just me." Sam smiled. "True. But you brought us all together, made it possible. How do you feel?" Jon considered the question. For so long, his mind had been burdened with guilt, regret, and the sense of carrying a torch in a storm. Yet standing here, with the city's lively hum rising on the wind, he felt a flicker of peace, or at least something close to it. "Better," he admitted. "Still haunted sometimes. Still uncertain if I can truly break the cycle. But better." Sam nodded. "That's all any of us can do, keep trying. If you hadn't, the wheel might have rolled over us all again. This time, maybe it's truly broken, or at least cracked." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. After a time, Sam cleared his throat. Word from the Citadel, they want me to return to finalize a few academic duties, but I told them I'm needed here. So they've sent an archmaester to assist with your local council structures. The Citadel is intrigued by your governance reforms. They see it as a unique experiment in Westeros's long history. Jon snorted softly. An experiment is one way to put it. Let's hope we don't fail. Sam clapped him on the shoulder. If we do, we'll learn. But I'd rather we succeed. The children in those streets deserve a realm that values their lives more than the ambitions of lords and queens. Jon gazed out once more, thinking of the next generation that would grow up in this changed landscape. He said quietly. They deserve more than we had. The day wore on. Jon attended a meeting about establishing a city orphanage near the Dragon Pit ruins. He signed edicts ensuring widows of fallen soldiers received small stipends. Each mundane act of governance felt like another brick in the foundations of a more stable world. He thought about how a single man's reign was fleeting in the grand sweep of history, but maybe he could lay seeds for something that outlived him. That thought carried him through the long hours, offering a sense of purpose. Months turned into another year. Gendry completed fortifications in the Stormlands. The Vale's new approach to security finally quelled the Cell's word bans. Dorne prospered. The Iron Islands, guided by Yara, embraced a precarious peace with the mainland. The North retained its distinct identity under Sansa, who kept the lines of communication open with King's Landing, reinforcing trade and mutual defense pacts. Over time, many lords grudgingly admitted that Jon's brand of leadership, somber, diligent, grounded in empathy, had allowed them to rebuild more effectively than any tyrant or conqueror could have. They might never revere him with the adoration once shown to Daenerys, but they respected him. Of course, pockets of dissent remained. Some nostalgic Targaryen loyalists muttered that the realm lacked the fiery dragon's heart it once had. Others insisted that a Stark on the throne was an abomination. But these voices were mostly overshadowed by the mundane reality of day-to-day improvements. Roads were safer. Markets flourished. The people had enough to eat. That, more than grand speeches, won their acceptance. In the quiet hours before dawn, Jon would sometimes walk the corridors of the Red Keep alone, memories drifting. He thought of Eddard Stark, of Robb, of Daenerys, of the looming war they had all faced. He thought of the child he once was, overshadowed by a label of bastardy. He realized that so much had changed, yet in some core sense he remained the same man who longed to do right, to protect others. Perhaps that, above all, made him a king worthy of the broken realm that still struggled to find its feet. And so he continued on day after day, forging a path not through conquest or fear, but through a relentless sense of duty and a heart that remembered every loss. In a land scarred by countless rulers, maybe that was the only hope for something better, the small but persistent promise that care and compassion could shape the destiny of Westeros more powerfully than dragonfire or iron swords ever could. And while ghosts lingered, Daenerys' memory, the calls for vengeance, the uneasy shadows at the edges of peace, Jon Snow quietly persevered, holding the realm together by the sheer resolve to honor the living and the dead alike. Jon Snow woke in darkness to the flicker of a single candle, his chamber quiet except for the faint crackle of its flame and the soft shifting of Ghost, who lay curled at the foot of the bed. He'd grown used to the hush of the Red Keep at night, an odd tapestry of silence broken by the occasional footstep of a patrolling gold cloak or the wind rattling loose shutters in the distant corridors. 3 years and more had passed since he first took the crown, and though the city was calmer now, his spirit never quite found true rest. Even the gentlest nights brought dreams and half-remembered ghosts. He dressed slowly, donning a simple woolen tunic and trousers instead of regal finery. When he was king at court, they expected him to wear an embroidered doublet or some conspicuous color that signified his station. But at this hour, none would see him. He set the circlet of Valyrian steel on the small table by the bed, careful not to clatter it. The cold metal always seemed heavier than it looked. Sometimes he half wondered if it were cursed. Ghost rose from his place, yawning, and joined Jon as he slipped into the corridor. A few servants dozed on benches, arms cradling heads, while a single guard outside his door snapped awake at the quiet approach of the king. "Go back to resting," Jon said softly, motioning for the guard to remain. "I'm only walking." The man nodded uncertainly, likely torn between his orders to keep watch and the king's instructions. In the end, he stayed at his post while Jon ghosted away, footsteps echoing faintly. Ghost's claws clicked softly on stone. Jon had walked these same corridors so many times that he could navigate them almost as well as the halls of Winterfell. Though the Red Keep would never feel like true home, it had become a place he understood, its mysteries revealed by slow exploration. Each tower, each crumbling staircase, each hidden door that servants used. Kings before him had built secret passages to hide in times of crisis. He sometimes wondered if the spirit of the Mad King lurked in those hidden walls or if Daenerys's presence lingered in the scorch marks that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. Jon descended a spiral staircase and came to a small courtyard that opened to the sky. The moon cast pale light over flagstones where scaffolds had once stood, now removed. The hush of pre-dawn hung thick, yet the city beyond the walls never truly slept. He could hear the faint caw of gulls, the distant rumble of wagon wheels on the cobblestones near the main gate. The smell of salt and faint sewage drifted up, reminding him that even in peace, King's Landing remained a place of overcrowded streets and dubious sanitation. Step by step it was improving, but there was always more to do. He stood there a while, letting the air wash over him, thinking of how far they had come since that ruinous day Daenerys fell. The city had begun to rebuild under his watch. The roads were somewhat safer, the people fed. A new structure of governance, though still imperfect, had calmed the realm. The fear that another tyrant might seize power had lessened some. Yet the realm was a tapestry of many colors, each patch precariously sewn together. At last, he returned inside, ascending to the private solar he used for early morning work. Ghost followed, tail swishing. The solar was small, unadorned, with a single window that faced east and caught the dawn light. Jon lit a few more candles and stirred the coals in the hearth. He settled at his desk, rummaging through some stray parchments. Even now, letters trickled in at all hours, requests from lords, merchant proposals, notes from distant corners of Westeros. He'd grown accustomed to reading them in the quiet of dawn, as it was the only time he could truly think. He broke the seal on one small scroll that bore the sigil of House Manderley. It contained an update on White Harbor's trade shipments to King's Landing, detailing how shipments of grain and salted fish had reached capacity. They requested a new distribution plan to avoid flooding the market. Jon studied the figures, wishing Sam were present to help interpret them. Sam was likely asleep at this hour, so he made a mental note to speak with him later. Another scroll concerned the Golden Tooth in the Westerlands, reporting stable conditions and a willingness to contribute funds to the Crown's reconstruction in exchange for lowered tariffs on gold. Jon set it aside. The last parchment made him pause. Its seal was plain, no sigil, but the script read, "From an ally in Bravos." He frowned, unrolling it. Inside, the letter was short: "Remnants of the Queen gather in secret, collecting coin from unknown benefactors. They speak of a new champion, rumored to be a blood relation to House Targaryen, though no one can verify. If you value your peace, watch the narrow sea." Jon exhaled, shoulders tensing. The remnants of the Queen had mostly gone quiet after Sarquo's execution, scattering across Essos. He'd hoped they would remain in disarray. The letter hinted otherwise. Could some distant cousin or pretender have emerged, claiming Targaryen blood? The Targaryen line was all but extinguished, aside from himself, but Essos was rife with rumors. Anyone with silver hair or some forged lineage might stir zealots who still worshipped Daenerys's memory. He set the letter down, recalling how these fanatics had proven dangerous before. Even if they lacked the strength to challenge the realm outright, their raids could undermine trade, disrupt shipping, and lure lords into conspiracies. He'd need Tyrion's cunning and Davos's experience to assess it. For a moment, he imagined how Daenerys might have responded, forging ahead with fire and blood, unleashing dragons upon them. But that path had ended in tragedy. He closed his eyes, steeling himself for the complexities. This was his responsibility. He would not meet violence with blind wrath. Outside the window, dawn broke, painting the sky in a faint wash of pink. Jon stood, slipping the letter into his tunic. It was time to face the day. Ghost padded after him, and they descended to the main council chambers where the daily business of ruling would soon begin. By the time he arrived, Tyrion was already there, bleary-eyed but awake, scribbling notes in his ledger. Davos was absent. He was overseeing a naval inspection in the harbor, but Sam sat near the end of the table, poring over large tomes about new administrative laws. Jon greeted them quietly, taking his seat at the head. The room was bright with newly installed windows, a marked improvement from the dim, smoky halls of old. Tyrion glanced up with a half-smirk. "You're early, Your Grace. Or have I overslept?" "I've been awake for hours," Jon said, gently handing over the Bravosi letter. "News from across the sea. Another rumor about the remnants." Tyrion's expression darkened as he read. Sam leaned forward, curious. When Tyrion finished, Sam took the parchment, skimming quickly. "There's always talk of some Targaryen pretender," Sam said softly, "but if there's any substance, it could be trouble." "We must be cautious," Jon agreed. "The Bravosi contacts have proven reliable in the past. We can't ignore it." Tyrion tapped the desk. We could dispatch discreet envoys to Bravos, Volantis, and Pentos. If these remnants are truly uniting under someone, rumor will spread. I'll ask the Iron Bank if they know of any unusual movements of coin. Follow the money. Jon nodded, relief at having a plan. Do that. Also, we should consider stepping up coastal patrols again. We can't keep sending large fleets, but a few more ships under trusted captains might deter infiltration. Tyrion agreed, making notes. Sam frowned in thought, pushing aside his large tome. If this rumored champion tries to claim they're a Targaryen, they'll need some proof. Perhaps an artifact or a maester's record. In times past, a drop of silver hair was enough to fool some. But an actual genealogical link is harder to fake. Jon recalled the fiasco with Aegon Targaryen decades before, rumored to be Rhaegar's son. So many believed it, so many died for that cause, yet it was shrouded in doubt. The mere notion of Targaryen blood could spark rebellions, though. He sighed. We'll keep watch. If the threat grows, we'll act. Until then, let's not incite panic. Tyrion nodded and gestured to other parchments on the table. Now, onto the day's concerns. The city council proposal you and Sansa championed is nearly ready. Each ward will elect or appoint a small group to represent them. They'll meet monthly with the Crown's administrators. We need to finalize the guidelines, including how much real power they hold. Some lords fear losing authority. Jon steeled himself. This was another front in the quiet war of reform. We proceed carefully. The wards must have some real influence, or else it's an empty gesture. But we can't append the entire feudal structure overnight. Let's consult with a few recognized guild leaders first, merchants, smiths, carpenters. Hear what they propose. So the morning wore on, with Sam highlighting new methods to store harvests, Tyrion juggling finances, and Jon weighing each decision. By midday, they broke for a brief meal. Jon hardly tasted the bread and stew set before him, his mind flicking between the Bravosi letter and the city council. Ghost lay under the table, tail occasionally thumping. Tyrion, between mouthfuls of bread, studied Jon with a thoughtful gaze. You seem even more solemn than usual, Tyrion remarked, voice low. Is something else troubling you? Jon took a moment to answer, swirling the stew. Only that for every step forward, it feels like there's another shadow behind us. We've done so much to rebuild, to unify the realm. And now another rumor of Targaryen heirs, another plot. It weighs on me. Tyrion's eyes softened with understanding. You've carried this weight longer than many men would. I suspect any king would feel the same. But you also have something most kings lack, a conscience that demands you do right by the people. That's not always a blessing, Jon murmured. Sometimes I envy the cold certainty of men like Tywin Lannister. They never seem troubled by guilt. Tyrion grimaced. True, but they left scars deeper than the ones they bore themselves. I'd rather a troubled king who tries to spare the innocent than a confident tyrant. They let the conversation lapse, finishing the meal in quieter reflection. Sam eventually rose, wiping his mouth, and excused himself to consult with the keep's librarians on the city council's charter. Tyrion wandered off to meet with a representative from the Iron Bank who happened to be in the city. Jon took a moment to stand by a narrow window, letting the fresh breeze wash over him. Beyond the walls, King's Landing sprawled in the midday sun. He could see the newly built spires of some neighborhood chapels, the scaffolding around half-restored houses, the busy movement of markets. This was the realm he had inherited, broken and battered, yet alive. He decided to visit the training yards, partly to clear his head. The yard bustled with young recruits practicing under the watchful eye of seasoned knights. Many of the old guard had fallen in the wars, so these were fresh faces, a generation that knew the stories but hadn't lived the horrors of the White Walkers or Daenerys's dragons. A few recognized Jon at once, stiffening. He nodded curtly, encouraging them to continue. He spotted Brienne of Tarth instructing a pair of novices in sword posture. She stepped back when she noticed Jon, letting the trainees focus on their sparring. Your Grace, she said, with a short bow. You've come to see if the new recruits can swing a sword? Jon offered a faint smile. Or if I still can. It's been too long since I had a proper spar. Brienne tilted her head. Would you like to test them? Might do them good to face something unpredictable. Jon surveyed the yard. He saw a sturdy lad, no older than 16, hefting a practice sword that looked too heavy for him. Another one, slim and tall, tried to balance a longs. Word, adjusting his stance awkwardly. Perhaps a demonstration if you think it'll help. She beckoned one of the older recruits, perhaps 18 or 19, with a determined set to his jaw. He was broad-shouldered, clearly stronger than the rest. When Brienne told him the king wished to spar, he paled but nodded. They swapped his blunt practice blade for a better one, though still blunted, and Jon accepted a sparring sword from one of the racks. He removed his cloak, letting Brienne tie back his sleeves so they wouldn't flap. Around them, the training yard fell into a hush, recruits forming a rough circle. Jon gave the young man a measured look. "What's your name?" "Martin Waters, Your Grace," the recruit said, voice shaking slightly. "From the Stormlands." Jon inclined his head. "Come at me with what you've learned." At Brienne's nod, Martin moved, quick but unrefined. Jon stepped lightly, parrying the first swing and testing the boy's reflexes. He remembered how he'd felt at Castle Black, out of place and uncertain, learning to fight the hard way. Martin's eyes flashed with nerves. He swung again, a bit wilder. Jon sidestepped, tapping the boy's wrist with the flat of the blade. "Your grip," Jon said softly, stepping away, "loosen it a fraction." "You're stiff." Martin nodded, adjusting. He attacked once more, and Jon let him come forward, meeting each blow with practiced ease. It felt good, almost calming, to move through the motions, to let muscle memory guide him. The recruits watched, some gasping when Jon evaded with minimal movement. After a few exchanges, Jon ended the bout by pivoting inside Martin's guard and placing the blunt sword near the lad's chest. "Yield," Martin panted, sweat on his brow. Jon lowered the blade, giving the recruit a nod of respect. "You have strength, but you need to calm your nerves and measure your swings." Martin bowed, stammering his thanks. The recruits murmured, impressed. Brienne offered a slight smile. Jon returned the practice sword to the rack, retrieving his cloak. For a moment, the tension in his shoulders eased. This was a simpler world where skill, not politics, decided the outcome. Then a gold cloak approached, bowing hastily. "Your Grace, Lord Aaron has arrived unexpectedly at the Red Keep, requesting an audience. He's in the Great Hall." Jon exhaled, slipping back into the role of monarch. He thanked Brienne, patted Martin on the shoulder, and departed with Ghost at his side. As he strode through the corridors, he wondered what Robin Aaron wanted this time. The young lord had married a rich lady some months ago in a modest but symbolic ceremony. For him to appear in the capital without warning suggested something urgent. The Great Hall was not as imposing as it had been in the days of the Iron Throne, but it still offered a sense of regal space. A simple black stone seat rose on a dais, wide enough to suggest authority but lacking the fierce grandeur of melted swords. Jon stepped inside and found Robin Aaron pacing near the dais, accompanied by a pair of his knights. The lord wore a rich green doublet embroidered with falcons in flight, his hair brushing his shoulders. He spotted Jon and bowed hurriedly. "Your Grace," he said. "Forgive me for coming unannounced, but I have dire news from the Vale." Jon motioned for him to speak. Robin's knights cast furtive glances around as though expecting an ambush. "Calm yourselves," Jon said, noticing their tension. "You're safe here." Robin took a shaky breath. "We've had an uprising near the Bloody Gate. A band of outlaws, rumored Sel's words, seized a small mountain village. They killed or chased away the local garrison. Worse, they claim fealty to a lord from Essos who supports the true Targaryen line. They're raising a banner with a red dragon skull on black." Jon's heart sank. So the rumored trouble from across the sea had begun making moves again. "How many?" "At least 100 armed men," Robin said, wringing his hands. "Small, but they could attract more if we don't act. The Vale is still recovering from earlier raider attacks. My advisors fear a larger force might be behind this." Jon nodded. "We can't let them gain a foothold. Has Lord Royce rallied the Knights of the Vale?" Robin swallowed. "He's mustering men, but the Bloody Gate is a strategic pass. We need swift reinforcements to trap these outlaws before they escape back into the mountains. My knights aren't enough. I came here hoping the crown could spare some forces or at least coordinate." Jon considered. The Vale was mountainous with narrow passes. An enemy entrenched there could pick off a large army. But if they moved quickly, they could dislodge them before they built defenses. "I'll speak with Tyrion and the council. The crown won't let the Vale face this alone." Relief flickered on Robin's face. "Thank you, Your Grace. My lady wife is traveling with me, waiting outside the city walls. I didn't want to risk her in the city if I had to leave in haste." Jon beckoned him forward, placing a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "We'll handle this together. We can't let these fanatics carve out a safe haven." They arranged to gather the council that very afternoon. Robin was escorted to rooms in the keep to freshen up, while Jon sent messages summoning Tyrion, Sam, Davos, who had just returned from the harbor, and a few key commanders from the city watch. By the time they assembled, the sun was high, illuminating the council chamber. Robin recounted what he knew. The outlaws had captured a small fortress near the village, which once belonged to a minor Vale lord who died in the wars. The fortress was half-ruined, but enough to provide defenses. They hung a black banner with a red dragon skull over the walls, proclaiming themselves loyal to the rightful Targaryen. Tyrion tapped his fingers on the table, a sign of deep thought. We cannot dismiss this as random banditry. It connects with the rumors from Essos. They might be trying to open a western front, so to speak. Davos agreed. If we let them keep that fortress, more recruits may slip in. The Vale's terrain is ideal for rebels to hide. Jon looked to Davos and Gendry, though Gendry was absent, still in the Stormlands, overseeing a separate matter. We need to muster a response quickly. The Vale's knights can fight in the mountains, but we should send additional men to bolster them. Perhaps a joint force, some from the Crown's Guard, some from the Vale, maybe a small group from the Riverlands if they can spare it. Robin nodded eagerly. Yes, that's what we need. If we strike soon, we can end this before it spreads. My men can guide the Crown's forces through the passes. Sam chimed in gently. We should also consider capturing some of these outlaws alive, if we can. We need information who's backing them, how they're funded, whether a larger invasion is planned. Jon agreed. A good point. We'll try to capture the leaders. Once we know more, we can adapt. So the plan formed. Davos volunteered to coordinate troop movements as he had a knack for logistics. Tyrion would remain to manage the city. Jon weighed again whether to ride out himself. If he appeared in person, it might inspire fear in the rebels. Some called him a demon for slaying Daenerys, but it also risked too much. After a moment of hesitation, he said, I'll join the expedition. My presence might deter them from any illusions that the realm is weak. And I know the Vale somewhat. Tyrion frowned. Your Grace, you risk your life every time you go to battle. The realm. I won't hide, Jon said. But we'll keep it measured. I won't charge him blindly. I'll fight alongside the knights if it comes to that. We must show we stand with the Vale. Robin Arryn looked both relieved and anxious at the idea of the king marching at his side. Davos nodded. If you're set on it, we'll be cautious. Let me plan the route. Within days, a force gathered at the city gates, some 300 men of the Crown's Guard, plus a handful of gold cloaks and siege engineers, not that they expected a prolonged siege. Jon donned armor bearing the combined sigils, Stark Dire Wolf and Targaryen Dragon, subdued in dark metal. He wore no crown, but his station was evident. Ghost padded by his horse's flank, uneasy among so many men. They departed King's Landing at dawn, a swirl of dust and hoofbeats, while Tyrion stayed behind to oversee the capital. The journey to the Vale took over a week. They passed through the Riverlands, forging alliances with local lords who agreed to send small levies if needed. Then they approached the high ground leading to the Vale, with rugged mountains rising in the distance. Robin grew more animated as they neared his home territory. Davos rode close to Jon, occasionally asking for input on the best approach. Jon deferred to the Vale men for local knowledge. Finally, they reached a winding pass that led toward the Bloody Gate. Scouts brought word that the outlaws occupied an abandoned fortress not far beyond the pass, perched on a rocky outcrop. They'd posted sentries on the ridges. Lord Royce's knights, about 100 strong, awaited them near a narrow gorge. Royce himself bowed stiffly to Jon and explained the situation. They call themselves the Red Dragons. They've raided nearby hamlets, forced peasants into labor. We tried to storm the fortress once, but were repelled by archers. They're not an army, but they're disciplined enough. Jon listened intently. Ghost sniffed the ground, ears pricked. If the outlaws had around 100 men, they were outnumbered by the combined Vale Crown forces. But the fortress, though small, had stout walls on 3 sides and a precipitous cliff on the 4th. A direct assault might be costly. They convened a strategy council at dusk. By torchlight, with a crude map drawn on parchment, Davos suggested encircling the fortress from 2 sides, cutting off escape routes. Meanwhile, a small force would approach the main gate as a feint, drawing their archers. Another group would climb a concealed path up the cliff face if it was truly scalable, launching a surprise attack. Lord Royce said he had men who knew the terrain well enough to try it. Jon agreed, seeing no better plan. The next day, they set it in motion. At dawn, the main host arrayed itself before the fortress, well out of arrow range, making a show of numbers. The Red Dragons displayed their black banner overhead, the red skull-like shape fluttering in the wind. From afar, Jon watched archers appear along the battlements. He wondered who led them and whether they'd truly fight to the death for some rumored Targaryen pretender. Davos led the feint near the fortress gates, sending a party forward with shields raised. Arrows rained down, but the men kept low, protected. Meanwhile, Lord Royce and a detachment from the Crown's Guard skirted around the ridge, guided by local scouts, to find the hidden path. Jon waited with the main group, scanning the walls through a spyglass. He saw men scuttling about, heard shouts echoing. They had ballistae or some siege weapon. He saw a makeshift catapult fling stones at Davos's shield line. Tension gripped Jon's chest. It was one thing to command from afar, another to be personally responsible for these men's lives. Ghost paced at his side, letting out a low whine. Hours crawled by. Then, near midday, horns sounded from the far side of the fortress. The watchers on the walls spun around, drawn by the commotion. Royce's men had scaled the cliff, surprising the outlaws from behind. Shouts erupted, a thunder of steel on stone. Jon ordered a swift advance. Davos's feint charged forward, smashing through the battered gate. The fortress interior erupted in chaos. Jon rode in with a second wave, sword drawn, though he kept to the rear at first, letting the knights lead. Arrows whizzed overhead, men bellowed war cries. Jon dismounted once inside the courtyard, finding a swirl of melee. He could see the black banner overhead pinned to a wooden post. The outlaws wore mismatched armor but fought fiercely, cursing the usurper as they swung. Jon parried a wild blow from a man with a ragged beard who spat in his face. Jon spun behind him, striking the man's helmet with the flat of his blade, knocking him cold. He would not kill unnecessarily if they could capture them. Another outlaw lunged, and one of Royce's knights tackled him. Davos rushed by, covered in dust, shouting for men to secure the keep's upper floors. As the fight wore on, more of the outlaws surrendered. Some tried to flee, but they were hemmed in by the encircling forces. By mid-afternoon, the fortress was taken. A ragged handful of resistors barricaded themselves in the keep's tower, refusing to yield. Jon joined Davos at the base of the tower, evaluating how to proceed. The tower's door was sturdy, but the outlaws had little food or water. Give them a chance to surrender, Jon said, raising his voice to carry through the stone. Those who yield will be spared unless they've committed murder. We want your leaders alive. Angry shouts answered him, but within minutes the door creaked open. Half a dozen men stumbled out, weapons cast aside. Another two dragged themselves, wounded and trembling. The last to emerge was a sallow-faced man with a scar across his nose, eyes filled with defiance. He glared at Jon. You can kill me, Targaryen, but we've only begun. Jon gestured for Davos's men to seize him. Who are you? The man gave a grim smile. Ulfar Lorne, once a Sellsword in Pentos. I pledged to the true Targaryen queen. We never accepted your betrayal. Your queen is dead, Jon said quietly, jaw tightening. And I ended her reign. If you wish to avenge her by butchering farmers in the Vale, you'll find no mercy here. Ulfar hissed. You played hero while she burned a city, but it was your fault, she snapped. We only uphold her dream. The new champion will come. He's across the sea, gathering power. Jon exchanged a look with Davos. So the rumors were true. Where's this champion? Who funds you? You'll get nothing from me, Ulfar spat. Your fancy reforms won't matter when the rightful heir takes what's his by blood. They bound Ulfar's hands along with the other prisoners and set about securing the fortress. Lord Royce's men hoisted down the black banner and tossed it in the dirt. Jon watched it fall, a grim echo of Daenerys's banners once raised over King's Landing. Now it symbolized fanaticism, twisting her memory. That night, they made camp around the fortress, treating the wounded and burying the dead. Jon and Davos interrogated the captives. Most were simple Sellswords, lured by promises of gold and a cause to fight for. They claimed a figure in Pentos, known only by the moniker Bloodworm, had financed them. Some said Bloodworm was a Targaryen bastard, others whispered he was just a merchant with illusions of grandeur. But all agreed he planned to bring war to Westeros. Jon listened, frustration mounting. Another shadow. Another pretender. The realm was weary of war, yet these men seemed eager to spark chaos. He ordered the prisoners taken back to the Eyrie where they would stand trial under Vale law. He left a small detachment to hold the fortress until the Vale could demolish it or regarrison it. Robin Arryn, though shaken, took renewed confidence in his alliance with the crown. They spent a week in the Vale, helping restore order to the seized village, ensuring the outlaws' hostages were freed. Jon met with local peasants who recounted the terror they'd endured, their livestock stolen, their houses ransacked. Some wept at the mention of a Targaryen banner, recalling the tales of Dragonfire in the south. Others spat curses, demanding vengeance. Jon could only assure them that justice would be done. On the return journey to King's Landing, Davos rode beside him, silent for a time. Then the older man said, "There's no doubt now, someone in Essos is fueling these remnants. We've scattered one cell, but how many more lurk? We must be ready." Jon agreed. "We'll increase naval patrols with Yara's help, keep an eye on every port. If an army tries to land, we'll see them coming." Davos nodded thoughtfully. "I'll talk to Gendry. He's forging new ballistae and warships. But I wonder if we can do more diplomatically. Perhaps approach the free cities, demand they deny safe harbor to these rebels. That might help," Jon allowed. Though the free cities often hedge their bets, siding with whoever pays them best. We'll see if the Iron Bank can pressure them. They reached King's Landing 2 weeks later, warned from travel but relieved to have succeeded in the Vale. Tyrion greeted them in the courtyard, saying much had transpired in their absence. A messenger from Braavos had arrived with further details about the rumored champion. This bloodworm had apparently been traveling between Lys and Pentos, hosting lavish feasts to recruit Sel's words. The messenger indicated that a fleet might be in the works. Jon and his advisors gathered in the council chamber where Tyrion relayed everything. It's unclear if this man truly claims Targaryen blood or if it's a ruse. But either way, coin is changing hands and men are eager to join. They whisper that he'll bring dragons back to Westeros. Sam looked skeptical. Dragons? There are no dragons left. Tyrion shrugged. Perhaps illusions or rumors. Still, illusions can raise armies if people believe strongly enough. The question is, do we wait or do we strike preemptively? Jon's jaw clenched. We can't invade the free cities on rumor alone. That would spark another war. We also risk turning neutral cities against us. No, we must wait, gather information, and fortify ourselves. If they cross the sea, we'll meet them. Until then, we watch. The council concurred, if reluctantly. Tyrion also mentioned that Sansa had written from Winterfell. The north remained stable, but she urged caution. Some northern lords whispered that if another Targaryen came with dragons, the north might prefer neutrality or independence rather than fight another southern war. Jon felt that old pang of guilt. He had no intention of forcing the north into conflict. But if the realm was threatened, unity might be necessary yet again. In the following weeks, the crown took steps to bolster its defenses. Davos oversaw an expansion of the royal fleet, drawing on the improved treasury. Gendry redoubled efforts in the foundries, forging new ballista bolts. Word went out to each region, reminding them of their pledge to uphold peace. Jon personally wrote to Yara Greyjoy, asking her to watch for suspicious activity at sea. He also penned letters to Dorne, requesting a discreet readiness in case war erupted. But life in the city continued. The local councils formed in each ward, starting the experiment in broader representation that Sansa and Jon had envisioned. Some bickering arose. Certain wealthy merchants refused to acknowledge the new council's authority, while common laborers demanded more say in taxes. Jon mediated as best he could, finding that this new system, though messy, offered a place for people to voice grievances without resorting to violence. The City Watch reported fewer riots and brawls. During one of these local council sessions, Jon attended in person wearing his simpler attire rather than regal robes. He listened as a blacksmith complained about the cost of shipping iron upriver, only for a merchant to retort that the blacksmith's prices were already too high. Neither recognized him at first, seeing only a tall man with dark curls and a grave demeanor. When they realized they were speaking to the king, both grew flustered, bowing. Jon waved them off, urging them to continue. That evening, he told Tyrion it was the most genuine discussion he'd heard about commerce since taking the throne. Yet under all this daily bustle, the threat of bloodworm loomed like a thundercloud on the horizon. Ravens from Braavos continued to arrive, each bearing tidbits of rumor. Some said bloodworm was preparing ships in secret coves around Lys. Others claimed he had the blessing of a powerful magister in Pentos who once admired Daenerys. A few whispered that a dragon egg had been discovered that he intended to hatch it. Most likely nonsense, Jon thought, but dangerous nonsense all the same. As the year wore on, the possibility of outright invasion hung over them. Jon tried not to let it consume him, but nightmares returned. Images of dragonfire over King's Landing, the memory of Daenerys' final breath. He strove to channel that dread into preparation, ensuring the realm was as strong as possible. Sansa visited briefly and he confided his worries. She offered her unwavering support, promising the North would not stand idle if a foreign pretender threatened them. Hearing that eased some of his anxiety, though he knew it might not calm the more isolationist northern lords. One evening, as he retired to his chambers, a messenger from the harbor arrived with urgent news. Ghost rumbled, and Jon bid the messenger to speak. The man breathlessly explained that a large Lysine galley had been spotted off the coast, carrying armed men who were turned away by local fishermen. The ship bore no open signs of alliance, but rumor suggested it might be linked to the remnants. It slipped away before the City Watch could intercept. Jon nodded gravely, sending an order to watch for that vessel. If Bloodworm was truly sending scouts, it might only be a matter of time before a bigger force tried to land. Amid all this tension, Tyrion suggested they throw a harvest festival in the capital, inviting lords from every region. His logic was that a public show of unity would boost morale, affirm alliances, and perhaps deter potential rebels by demonstrating that the realms stood together. Jon hesitated at the idea, but Sam and Davos agreed with Tyrion. The small folk needed hope and normalcy. So preparations began. The festival was planned for the autumn equinox, featuring open markets, feasts, and competitions. The day arrived with crisp air and bright sunlight. Banners of various houses fluttered along the main thoroughfare, though none soared as tall as the black and white standard of the crowned Stark's dire wolf in one quadrant, Targaryen's dragon in another. Crowds thronged the streets, sampling roast meats, fresh bread, honey cakes. Street performers juggled or sang ballads of the wars. Despite the underlying tensions, the city was alive with laughter for the first time in years. Jon donned a dark cloak clasped with a simple dragon wolf pin, forgoing the circlet except for official ceremonies. He walked among the stalls, accompanied by a small guard and ghost who drew fascinated stares from children. The city watch kept order, ensuring no one was trampled in the crush. Jon paused at a booth where an old woman sold carved wooden figures. She had carved dire wolves, dragons, and other symbols. She blinked up at him with watery eyes. "Your Grace," she managed, bowing so low her back cracked. "Will you take one? A gift for all you've done." He gently picked up a small wooden dire wolf, its details lovingly etched. "Thank you," he said, pressing coin into her hand. "Keep the realm in your prayers." She nodded, tears welling. Ghost sniffed the wooden wolf curiously. Nearby, Tyrion emerged from the throng, popping a honeyed pastry into his mouth. He gave Jon a thumbs up, pastry still in hand, as if to say the festival was going well. Jon forced a small smile. Yes, for at least this day, the realm could pretend they were not on the brink of another war. After an hour, Jon made his way to the courtyard of the Red Keep for a jousting exhibition. Knights from the Crownlands, the Reach, and the Stormlands participated. He wasn't keen on the spectacle of men knocking each other from horses, but the crowds loved it. At least no one would be seriously hurt if they kept the blunted lances. The audience cheered as a tall knight unhorsed his opponent in a clean strike, splintering the lance. Jon wondered if he'd have once enjoyed competing, back before everything changed. A hush fell when a masked knight rode onto the field, armor painted black, with a red dragon emblem. The watchers exchanged uneasy murmurs. Jon's guard tensed. Then the knight lifted his visor, revealing a youthful face with bright green eyes. He was no remnant, only a brash young man wanting to make a statement. Some in the crowd jeered, others clapped. Jon remained impassive, though he felt a flare of anger at the casual use of Daenerys' sigil for show. Yet it was not illegal. Knights often displayed personal sigils in tournaments. The knight lost his tilt, failing to unhorse a veteran from the Reach. As he toppled to the dirt, a few onlookers laughed. Jon exhaled, relieved this wasn't some infiltration. He almost felt pity for the man, craving attention or perhaps toying with danger by wearing a dragon's crest. The festival ended with no serious incidents, for which Jon was grateful. But that night, as the city quieted, news arrived that disturbed him anew. A Braavosi ship had docked, carrying an emissary from the Iron Bank. Tyrion met with the emissary first, gleaning that Bloodworm had indeed purchased multiple vessels in Lys. The bank was uncertain of the exact number, but it could be as many as 20 ships, possibly more. Armed with mercenaries, they could wreak havoc along the coast if they chose. Jon convened an emergency council where Tyrion summarized the conversation. Sam rubbed his eyes wearily. Davos paced. Gendry, who had come to attend the festival, stood near the hearth, arms folded. 20 ships, maybe more, Davos said grimly. With skilled mercenaries, that's an invasion in the making. Tyrion nodded. They might land in Dorne or the Stormlands, or even sail north to White Harbor. We can't defend every inch of coastline. Jon leaned forward. We'll have to rely on alliances. Yara Greyjoy can patrol the western coast, but we'll need the royal fleet to watch the eastern side. The Stormlands under Gendry can reinforce. Dorne might guard the southern seas. If we form a coordinated blockade, we might intercept them before they land. Davos frowned. That's assuming we know where to position our ships. The coastline is vast. We might try to draw them out, send a message that we're vulnerable in a particular harbor, then ambush. Jon considered the risk of such a ploy. Possible, but dangerous. We need more intelligence. If we can bribe or infiltrate Bloodworm's circle in Essos, we'd learn their plans. Tyrion snapped his fingers. I have acquaintances in Pentos, those who remain from my earlier travels. We might be able to place a spy. Then do it, Jon said. We must act quickly. So they set about weaving a net of espionage, sending quiet missives to Pentos. Davos and Gendry prepared the fleet for a possible confrontation. The city's new watch committees were informed that if an invasion alarm sounded, they should help usher the populace to safety. In the weeks that followed, tension mounted again. The daily tasks of governance continued: court sessions, local council meetings, disputes among merchants, but a sense of foreboding permeated everything. Ravens flew in and out carrying scraps of rumor. Some said Bloodworm had delayed sailing due to storms in the summer sea. Others claimed he was waiting to hire the Golden Company, though that band had been decimated in the war under Cersei's employ. One crisp morning, a Pentoshi spy's message arrived, unsealed, in a battered state. It read, Bloodworm's real name believed to be Melis Naro, bastard son of a Lysine magister who once welcomed Daenerys. He claims Rhaegar Targaryen's blood through his mother's line, but records are uncertain. He's dangerous, charismatic. He's also rumored to have found some relic of House Targaryen to prove his claim. The fleet sets sail soon. Jon stared at the letter, dread coiling inside him. A relic? Could it be some old Valyrian steel weapon or a dragon egg? Even if it was a hoax, ignorant Cell's words might rally behind it. He summoned the council. They agreed to stage watchers along the coast from Dorne to the Vale, with ravens ready to dispatch at the first sight of an unfamiliar fleet. Gendry's ships patrolled the waters near Dragonstone, scanning the horizon. Yara Greyjoy kept her own watch around the Iron Islands, though the threat was more likely from the Narrow Sea. Still, no invasion came. Days passed, turning into weeks. The tension grew almost unbearable. The realm held its breath. With each passing dawn, people asked if the threat had faded or if they were living in the calm before the storm. Jon went through his duties with grim resolve, refusing to let fear paralyze him. He ordered more fortifications at key ports, encouraging local lords to prepare but not to panic. Then, near the onset of winter's chill, ravens arrived from several coastal towns south of King's Landing, reporting sightings of foreign ships on the horizon. Dozens, perhaps more, heading north. The watchers along the shore lit signal fires. Davos, stationed in a small outpost by the sea, dispatched an urgent raven. Enemy fleet spotted near Shipbreaker Bay. Gendry deploying. We need reinforcements. Unknown numbers, but at least 15 war galleys. Cell's words aboard. Jon called the banners. The city watch was left under Tyrion's control to maintain order, while Jon himself rode for the Stormlands with half of the royal forces. Sansa, alerted in the north, began mustering men in case the threat spread. Dorne likewise pledged to guard its borders. The roads churned under the hooves of thousands. It felt like the start of another war just when the realm had begun to heal. Jon refused to let despair take hold. He wore his battered armor, the same he'd used in battles against the dead. Ghost loped tirelessly beside him. By the time they reached the Stormlands, the skies were gray, the sea churning with ominous waves. Gendry's scouts guided them to a coastal cliff overlooking Shipbreaker Bay. Below, they could see the enemy fleet, a ragged but sizable collection of warships. Black banners fluttered, though not Daenerys's three-headed dragon. Instead, a single red serpent-like shape curled around what appeared to be a stylized crown. Jon recognized the combination of Targaryen imagery twisted into something new. He conferred with Davos and Gendry. The Crown's fleet awaited them just beyond a headland, ready to engage if the enemy tried to land. On the shores, Gendry had positioned archers and spearmen. They planned to let the enemy come close, then strike. The question remained, would Bloodworm land peacefully or attempt an immediate assault? Their question was answered at dawn the next day. A group of enemy longboats approached the rocky shore, loaded with armed men. Gendry ordered archers to hold until they were in range. The invaders rowed closer, chanting some unknown war song. Then, as the first men leapt onto the beach, Gendry signaled the archers. A volley of arrows rained down, cutting down many in the surf. Shouts rang out as the men scrambled for cover behind driftwood and rocks. From the hilltop, Jon could see the chaos. He donned his helm, preparing to lead a detachment down the slope to repel them. Ghost let out a low growl, ears flattened. Davos was already in position with a line of infantry. The plan was to keep them pinned on the beach, letting the tide and the Crown's ships do the rest. But then horns blared from the sea. A half-dozen of the enemy war galleys advanced, their decks bristling with crossbowmen. They began firing at Gendry's ships, which returned fire with ballista bolts. The waters erupted in a clash of hulls and sails. Flames burst on one of the enemy ships, possibly from a lantern knocked over. Screams echoed across the bay. Jon realized the entire confrontation might devolve into a bloody mess unless they could find the flagship, presumably carrying Bloodworm himself. If the leader fell, the Sellswords might break. Word reached Jon that a large galley near the center, with black sails and a banner at the masthead, could be the flagship. Gendry's best vessel, the Iron Oath, was moving to intercept. But the seas were rough, waves crashing furiously. Jon glanced at Davos. "I'll go with you by land. We can try to catch any landing parties that slip away." They hurried down to the beach, clad in mail. The sand was churned with footprints, blood, and broken oars. Enemy mercenaries huddled behind a cluster of rocks, exchanging arrow fire with Gendry's archers. Jon roared for the archers to advance while he and a handful of knights moved along the shore, cutting off the mercenaries' retreat. Ghost bounded ahead, snarling at a man who tried to charge with a spear. The man recoiled only to be struck down by one of Jon's knights. A second wave of longboats tried to land further down the beach. Davos rallied the spear line, meeting them in the shallows. Shouts and splashes mixed with the ring of steel. Jon saw a tall mercenary with braided hair rush forward, cursing in High Valyrian. He wore armor emblazoned with a stylized dragon. Jon met his blade, the force jarring him. The man hissed, "Traitor King," in broken common tongue. Jon twisted aside, hooking the mercenary's sword arm with his own blade and delivering a short slash. The mercenary fell into the waves. All around them, the beach became a battleground. The enemy pressed hard, desperate to secure a foothold. But Gendry's men held firm. Arrows rained from the cliffs above, and each landing craft was met with fierce resistance. Still, the fight seemed poised on a knife's edge, for the enemy had numbers and reckless fervor. Farther out at sea, Gendry's warships grappled with the enemy galleys. Fire flickered on the waves, lighting the gloom of early morning. Jon craned his neck, trying to spot the black-sailed flagship. If Bloodworm was there, capturing or killing him might end this quickly. But the sea churned violently, and he couldn't see which ship was which. A shrill horn blast signaled that a portion of the enemy had broken through on the northern side of the beach. Jon mustered a reserve of knights, leading them in a desperate push. The surf crashed at their ankles as they clashed with sellswords who'd managed to land. Ghost threw himself at one man, dragging him down. Another lunged at Jon with an axe, but Jon parried, stepping in to slash the foe across the chest. The man collapsed, spitting blood. The tide rose, frothing around them. More enemy rowboats battered the shore. Sellswords stumbled out, quickly forming shield walls. Jon's knights hammered into them. It became a brutal melee of shield and sword, the roar of voices drowning out everything. At one point, an arrow whizzed by Jon's helm, narrowly missing. He saw Davos cursing from a distance, rallying men. Then, abruptly, horns blared from the sea again. Gendry's flagship, the Iron Oath, was in flames, or so it appeared. Yet it pressed forward, ramming one of the enemy galleys amidships. The galley cracked, men screaming as they toppled into the water. Another crown ship circled, unleashing a hail of crossbow bolts. The line of black-sailed vessels wavered. Jon glimpsed a large ship listing, its sails torn. Perhaps that was the flagship. On the shore, the mercenaries heard the commotion and some began to falter. Fear flickered in their eyes. A rumor spread that the flagship was sinking. Jon seized the moment, shouting, "Stand down, and you'll be spared." Some threw down their weapons, but others fought on, yelling for Bloodworm and the rightful Targaryen. Gradually, the crown's forces gained ground. Broken bodies littered the sand. The stench of salt and blood mingled in the air. Jon advanced step by step, sword raised, until the last pockets of resistance broke. They ran or surrendered, the swirl of wave and foam tinted red. Jon's arms trembled with exhaustion, but he forced himself to remain focused. At last, the fighting on the beach subsided into scattered scuffles. Ghost, spattered with blood, returned to Jon's side. Davos limped over, battered but alive. "We've got them on the run," he panted. "The fleet is in disarray." Jon scanned the horizon. Flames danced on multiple vessels. One enemy galley fled south, another drifted powerless. A few others looked to be in full retreat. Gendry's warships pursued. If Bloodworm's ship was among the damaged or fleeing, the conflict might end soon. But the cost in lives was steep. As the day wore on, they secured the beach, taking prisoners. Bodies washed ashore, some wearing black and red surcoats. A triumphant cheer rose when a scouting boat returned with news. Gendry's men had captured a large galley that might be the flagship. On its deck, they found a tall man in black armor, unconscious from a head wound. The men believed he was Bloodworm or Melisnaro. Hastily, Gendry and his sailors bound the man and brought him to the beach under heavy guard. Jon, surrounded by his knights, waited near a wrecked portion of shoreline as they dragged the limp figure onto the sand. Salt water dripped from his armor, his face pale and streaked with blood. A battered helm with a stylized dragon crest hung from his belt. The watchers parted, letting Jon approach. He knelt by the man, checking for signs of life. The chest rose and fell faintly. A guard pried open the man's breastplate, revealing a deep bruise and shallow gash along his side. Another guard pulled a chain from around his neck from which dangled a curious amulet. It resembled an old Targaryen sigil, though twisted in shape, possibly from old Valyrian design. Jon's heart hammered. Had they truly captured the rumored champion? If so, this might be the end of the threatened invasion, at least for now. He motioned for a maester to tend to the man's wounds. Alive, he could reveal who funded him, whether there were more fleets. Davos exhaled in relief. We'll keep him prisoner. The rest will scatter without their leader. Jon nodded grimly. Let's see who he really is. They established a makeshift camp on the beach, securing the survivors. The Crown's fleet and Gendry's men finished off any remaining enemy ships that refused to surrender, though some mercenaries escaped on smaller vessels. By nightfall, the once bustling shoreline was a field of wreckage. Fires dotted the bay, lighting the dark waters. A pungent haze of smoke drifted inland. In a large command tent, Jon, Davos, and Gendry gathered while a maester examined the unconscious prisoner on a pallet. The man's face, once the salt and blood were wiped away, showed regal features, high cheekbones, a proud jaw, dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. A scar marked his left brow. He looked older than Jon expected, perhaps in his late 30s. His body bore an old brand on the shoulder, possibly from slavery. At last, the maester pronounced that the wound was not fatal, though the man had lost blood and needed rest. Jon ordered him kept under constant guard. Gendry studied the amulet they'd taken. It's some Valyrian craftsmanship, I think, he murmured. But it doesn't prove he's Targaryen. Jon recalled the letter that said Bloodworm had found a Targaryen relic. Perhaps this was it. Some old house medallion that might dupe mercenaries into believing Meleys Naro had legitimate heritage. The real proof, if any existed, would likely be locked in false genealogies. Still, the illusions had been enough to gather a fleet. 2 days passed before the prisoner awoke. The Crown's forces, bolstered by local Stormlanders, scoured the coastline for any fleeing mercenaries. Jon kept the man in a guarded tent, allowing a maester to treat him. At last, word came that he was conscious. Jon entered, flanked by Davos, Gendry, and half a dozen armed guards. Ghost followed, teeth bared. Meleys Naro sat upright, grimacing in pain. His dark eyes flicked to Jon. A flicker of recognition or disdain glinted there. So, he rasped. The traitor king himself comes to gloat. Jon stood a few paces away. I am Jon of House Targaryen and House Stark, King of Westeros. You call yourself Bloodworm? A sneer curled Meleys' lip. A name they gave me in Lys. My birth name is Meleys Naro. I claim the blood of Targaryens through my mother's line. A distant branch exiled to Essos long ago. Gendry spoke up. You led an invasion of our shores, murdered our people. If you hoped to win hearts, you chose poorly. Meleys let out a barking laugh, then grimaced at the pain in his ribs. Win hearts? I seek to avenge the rightful Queen Daenerys. She promised to break the wheel and you murdered her. The blood of Targaryen kings runs in my veins. Not yours, bastard. Jon's expression remained stony. Daenerys died because she slaughtered thousands of innocents, threatened to burn more. Your cause is built on a lie. Meleys' eyes burned with zeal. She was a liberator, driven to extremes only by the treachery around her. She freed me from my chains. I owe her my life. I vowed to carry on her legacy. He pressed a trembling hand to his side, glaring at the guards. Hundreds followed me willingly. You'll never stop the dream. Jon kept his voice calm. Your fleet is destroyed. Your men are captured or scattered. If you think more will come, they'll face the same fate. I offer you a chance to surrender, to reveal who aided you in Essos. If you cooperate, perhaps you'll stand trial rather than facing swift judgment. Meleys clenched his jaw, eyes drifting to the amulet Gendry held. You know nothing of House Targaryen's secrets, Snow. That amulet is a symbol of what the dragons once were, and what they can be again. A murmur swept the tent. Davos frowned deeply. Ghost let out a low growl. Jon felt a chill. He remembered the destruction dragons wrought at King's Landing. Your dragons are gone, he said quietly. There are no more. Drogon vanished. Rhaegal and Viserion are dead. Let it die. The man smirked, revealing blood-stained teeth. There are eggs still out there, hidden caches from old Valyria, waiting to hatch. Daenerys Targaryen found 3 in a wasteland. More remain. Perhaps I'll never see them, but the dream of fire will never die. You, of all people, should know the power that name carries. Jon stiffened. He'd heard rumors of hidden dragon eggs, but after all the turmoil, none had surfaced. Still, the possibility lingered like a curse. He refused to let that fear undo the realm again. You can keep your dreams, he said. It ends here. You'll face justice. Meleys coughed, glaring. Then get on with it, Kinslayer. Let history see you as the man who killed every Targaryen but yourself. Jon said nothing more, turning to the guards. Keep him alive. We will take him to King's Landing for a fair trial. Let him speak his claims before the lords of the realm. Outside, the wind whipped across the beach, carrying the scent of salt and ashes. Davos followed Jon out, voice low. You'll give him a public trial, like Sarquo? Jon nodded, exhaustion weighing on him. He deserves no less. Let the realm see that we don't execute men in secret. If he's guilty, the sentence will be clear. A long silence stretched. Gendry came up behind them, wiping sweat from his brow. We lost good men here, he said. But it could have been worse. If Meleys had landed with more ships, or if we hadn't had watchers on the coast. Jon set a hand on Gendry's shoulder. Your vigilance saved many lives. Thank you. Gendry grimaced. We do our duty. In the days that followed, the Crown's forces regrouped, capturing stragglers and ensuring the beaches were cleared of debris. Civilians emerged from hiding, returning to find wreckage and bodies. Jon allotted funds to help rebuild. Then they marched back toward King's Landing with Meleys Narrow in chains, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past by indulging cruelty. He would stand trial, publicly and openly, in the Great Hall. Tyrion greeted them at the city gates, relief on his face. News had arrived of the victory, though a bloody one. Jon allowed himself only a single night of rest before calling a meeting of the lords and officials. They convened in the Red Keep's Great Hall, some still dusty from travel. Word spread that Bloodworm was captured, fueling curiosity among the nobility and common folk alike. The trial began the next morning. Meleys was brought forth, still injured but able to stand, wearing shackles. He cast a contemptuous glance at the crowd, which included Sam, Davos, Gendry, Tyrion, and many lords from the Crownlands and Stormlands. Scribes documented every word. Jon sat on the Blackstone seat, Ghost at his feet, recalling how he'd sentenced Sarquo. Tyrion read the charges, inciting invasion, piracy, murder, conspiracy to overthrow the crown. Witnesses testified about the beach battle, the mercenaries' crimes. The man who introduced himself as Meleys Narrow claimed to carry Targaryen blood, brandishing the amulet as proof. He spat accusations at Jon, calling him an oathbreaker who slew Daenerys out of jealousy. Some onlookers flinched at the mention of Daenerys' name, the memory of her last days still raw. When asked for evidence of his lineage, Meleys only repeated that his mother was a Targaryen exile killed by slavers. He had no official records, only the amulet and the knowledge passed down in his family. Sam Tarly spoke, saying he found no genealogical record that matched Meleys' claims. Perhaps there was a faint possibility of a distant bastard line, but nothing conclusive. The crowd seemed unconvinced. Meleys faced the assembly with fervor, insisting that Daenerys had named him her spiritual successor in Essos, though none could corroborate that. He ranted about the dragon dream, about retribution for Daenerys' murder. Some lords looked away in discomfort, others murmured with scorn. Jon sat quietly, letting the trial unfold. At last, it fell to him to pronounce judgment. He stood, voice echoing in the hall. Meleys Narrow, also known as Bloodworm, you have led an armed invasion of this realm, killed innocent people, and claimed a heritage you cannot prove. You have allied with fanatics who spread terror in Daenerys' name. Whether or not you carry a drop of Targaryen blood, your actions have sown chaos and death. A hush fell. Meleys' eyes burned, but he said nothing. Jon continued, the realm has no place for such cruelty. We are trying to rebuild from years of war. Yet we offered you a fair trial. Lords and ladies, you have heard the evidence. How do you judge? A murmur swept the hall as the assembled lords gave their verdict. Guilty. Davos, Gendry, Sam, and Tyrion each confirmed the crimes were proven. Even a few who might have disliked Jon declared Meleys guilty, for the invasion was undeniable. Jon turned back to Meleys, sorrow mixing with resolve. Then by the laws of Westeros, I sentence you to die for your crimes. May the gods judge your soul. Meleys let out a harsh laugh. Kill me, Kinslayer. It won't stop the dragon's return. You can't kill a dream. A chill traveled the hall. Jon remained impassive. Guards, take him away. The next dawn, as the sky glowed pale over King's Landing, Meleys Narrow was brought to the courtyard under heavy guard. A crowd gathered, soldiers, nobles, commoners. The black banner he once raised had been dragged in as well, a final symbol of the threat he posed. Jon arrived wearing the same armor as at the beach. Ghost patted at his side. He'd chosen to personally carry out the sentence once more, a tradition from his days in the north. Mealy stood by the block, hands bound, hatred etched on his face. He glared at Jon until the very end. When the time came, Jon raised Longclaw. He hesitated only a heartbeat, recalling the man's words, "You can't kill a dream." Then he brought the blade down in a single clean stroke. The crowd gasped. Blood pooled. The hush that followed was almost suffocating. Jon stepped back, letting a soldier remove the corpse. He stared at Longclaw's dark steel, remembering how he had beheaded Sarquo II and how many others before them. The weight of each life pressed on him. Tyrion approached with a somber nod, and Davos guided him away. The lords and the city folk began to disperse. Another threat ended, at least for now, though the dreams of fire and blood would likely linger in pockets of Essos for years. As the weeks passed, the realm returned to an uneasy normal. Letters from Sansa in the north and Yara in the Iron Islands expressed relief that the invasion was thwarted. The battered Stormlands began to rebuild their coastal defenses. The City Watch settled back into routine, and the local councils carried on their bickering. No further fleets appeared off the coast, and the Braavosi contacts reported that Mealy's Naro's supporters vanished or turned to other mercenary contracts. Yet Jon found no triumph in it. Each day he rose to sign new edicts, to oversee that orphans were sheltered, that roads were repaired, that lords settled disputes. He met with Tyrion and Sam, planning how to strengthen the realm's institutions so one man's ambition couldn't spark a civil war. He wrote to the free cities, warning them not to harbor any more dragon-bound pretenders. Some complied, others ignored him. Winter finally set in, though less harshly than in prior years. A light dusting of snow fell over King's Landing, enchanting the rooftops. One morning, Jon stood on a balcony watching the flakes drift onto the courtyard. He listened to the muffled city sounds and felt an ache for the north, for a simpler existence. He couldn't deny that the realm was safer now than it had been in decades. The wars had ended, fanatics were quelled, the people's lives improved. But each victory weighed heavily on him. He remembered Daenerys' vision of a better world, unchained from old tyrannies. He remembered the shining hope he once felt at her side and the horror that followed. "I never wanted this," he whispered, breath clouding in the cold air. Ghost huffed softly beside him, as if understanding. Tyrion found him there, blinking at the snow. They spoke of the next steps, continuing the local councils, forging a stable monarchy that might endure beyond Jon's lifetime. Tyrion half-joked about a successor. "You may want to marry eventually, produce an heir. The lords whisper about it." Jon shook his head, that old pang of guilt stirring. "I can't think of it now," he murmured. "One step at a time." The Hand accepted that, though he cautioned that the realm needed a line of succession to prevent chaos. Jon, mindful of the tragedies that came from Targaryen bloodlines, remained reluctant. One day, perhaps he would address it. For now, the memory of Daenerys weighed too heavily, and the realm demanded all his energy. So life went on. The city endured the gentle winter and saw an early spring. Merchants from Dorne brought fresh fruit, which the people welcomed. Trade routes opened more fully to the Reach, and the blacksmith forges in King's Landing thrived under Gendry's oversight. The North, guided by Sansa, enjoyed stable leadership, though she wrote often of minor unrest among clans who wanted to remain separate from southern affairs. Through it all, Jon persevered. He walked the city's streets in plain clothes, hearing the voices of common folk who no longer cowered at the mention of dragons or endless war. In him, they saw a king who had faced death, who had killed to protect them, but who never glorified that killing. The City Watch grew more disciplined, and crime began to recede. The local councils grew in confidence, so that disputes were settled in halls rather than with swords in alleyways. Sometimes at night, he dreamed of a distant horizon beyond the sea, glimpsing the silhouette of a dragon. He would wake, heart-pounding, half expecting to see Daenerys at his side. But she was gone, and the realm she left behind slowly healed in fits and starts. Jon told himself that her legacy was complicated, that nothing was ever truly simple in the Game of Thrones. Yet perhaps the best way to honor her was to ensure the people never again suffered from the madness of absolute rule or the tyranny of conquerors who believed might made right. Thus, season after season, King Jon, once a reluctant bastard, upheld his vow to protect the realm. He and his council navigated the fragile tapestry of alliances. They withstood the last echoes of Targaryen fanaticism. They fostered a new sense of shared governance that gave voice to the once voiceless. And while old grudges and new threats would always lurk, whispering of dragons, of vengeance, of the lure of power, the realm found a measure of stability it had not known in generations. Jon bore it all with stoic resolve and a quiet sorrow that never fully left him. He wore the crown he never wanted. He passed sentence on those who threatened the innocent. He carried the scars of one who had loved and lost, a man who knew the horror of war and the fragility of peace. The seven kingdoms, battered by fire and ice, stood behind him because, for once, they believed a king might truly care more for them than for himself. In that belief, the realm found hope. In that hope, Jon found purpose, even if not solace. From the snows of Winterfell to the scorching sands of Dorne, from the stony Iron Islands to the green fields of the Reach, the name Jon Targaryen, still often called Jon Snow, came to mean not conquest or fire, but quiet diligence, mercy where possible, justice where needed. He was no legendary dragonlord. He did not breathe flame or promise the world. He was merely a man who had seen too much death, who had killed the woman he loved for the sake of the realm, and who sought to spare others that same cost. In time, the orphans he fed grew into stable tradesmen. The battered lords of war-torn lands discovered a reluctant respect for his measured decrees. The councils flourished, bridging divides between highborn and low. The people, while never fully forgetting the horrors of dragons or White Walkers, at least slept easier knowing their king did not hunger for greatness. They told tales of him in taverns and around campfires, describing his solemn face, his ghost-white direwolf, his steadfast manner. Some found the tales comforting, others found them dull compared to the wild legends of his predecessors. But for a land exhausted by drama and ruin, perhaps dullness was a blessing. Years passed, and though new challenges emerged, trade disputes, minor rebellions, border tensions, no cataclysmic war engulfed Westeros again. Jon oversaw alliances with Essos traders who recognized that the rumored dragons were not returning, that the time for conquest was over. He improved the city's infrastructure, erecting new sewers and aqueducts, ensuring clean water for its swelling population. The local councils gained influence, shaping policies on taxes and commerce. Even the lords who once derided these reforms found that a happier populace meant fewer rebellions. Now and then whispers of Targaryen heirs emerged, some new pretender in the free city's claiming lineage. But none gained enough momentum to threaten the realm. The scars of Bloodworm's defeat still loomed large, deterring any grand assault. Jon watched each rumor with weary vigilance, ordering that the coasts remain guarded, that spies stay alert. Yet no new armies arrived. Over time, the memory of Daenerys's conquest and demise receded into the annals of history. On the anniversary of his coronation, a small feast was held in the Red Keep, more subdued than any grand affair from the days of old. Lords from across Westeros attended, sharing cautious goodwill. Sansa came from Winterfell, greeting Jon with warmth and subtle pride in how the realm had grown. Davos toasted him quietly, praising his unwavering moral compass. Tyrion, half jesting, claimed they'd never had a king so reluctant to spend the treasury yet so effective at restoring it. Jon thanked them all, feeling the pang of their trust heavy on his heart. He gazed over the assembled faces, once bitter rivals, now cooperating, if not entirely united in love, at least in acceptance. There was no single banner overshadowing them, no dragon's sword overhead. Yet in their place, a sense of practical peace hovered, a fragile but real phenomenon. That night, Jon left the feast early. He walked to the quiet godwood that had been replanted in a courtyard of the keep, a few saplings from the north, nurtured carefully in the southern climate. He stood beneath the slender branches, the moonlight silvering his armor. Ghost lay nearby, muzzle on paws, watchful. Jon closed his eyes, recalling how Ned Stark once prayed before a heart tree, how Bran had become something beyond mortal men. He murmured words of thanks to the old gods or any gods who might listen. For though he was no devout priest, he believed in the power of remembrance. He silently spoke the names of all he had lost, Ned, Robb, Arya who had vanished on distant seas, Bran who dwelt in the north with his mystic gifts, Daenerys who had burned too bright. He asked for their guidance in forging a realm that might outlast the cycles of vengeance. The air was still. No mystical vision answered him. Only the rustle of leaves and ghosts' quiet breathing. Yet Jon felt a faint sense of acceptance as though the land recognized his efforts. He opened his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. So long as he lived, he would carry on. And carry on he did. In the years that followed, the Seven Kingdoms became less a battleground for dynastic ambition and more a tapestry of cautious cooperation. Families who once warred found common purpose in trade agreements or shared local councils. The monarchy did not vanish, but its hold on daily life softened, replaced by more direct forms of local governance. Jon reigned from King's Landing, yet he frequently traveled, riding to the Reach to ensure fair harvest distributions, visiting the north to settle issues of autonomy, sailing briefly to the Iron Islands at Yara's insistence that he understand their ways. Wherever he went, he carried that same quiet approach, listening before he spoke, punishing wrongdoing with neither relish nor hesitation. Some called him a dull king, a caretaker rather than a conqueror. Others saw him as the best chance for lasting peace in a land battered by centuries of storms. Over time, even those who begrudged him admitted that fewer people starved, fewer villages burned. The monstrous wars of the past became stories told by grandparents to wide-eyed children. Many of those children would grow up never seeing a dragon or hearing an army's drums. And though that might seem less grand, it allowed them to live with hope, building families and futures that did not revolve around crowns and swords. Jon sometimes smiled at the thought, remembering how it felt to be a child overshadowed by the question of his parentage. Better that the next generation grow up overshadowed by nothing at all. Sometimes in the hush before dawn, he still felt the ghosts, Daenerys' face sure. Mirroring with grief and determination, Ned's stern kindness, the luminous eyes of the White Walkers. He would wake, heart pounding, and look around his chamber. No dragon's shadow flickered on the walls, no scream of the dead echoed. Slowly, he would realize it was only memory. Then he would breathe, calm his racing heart, and prepare for another day of deliberation and duty. He never stopped missing those he lost, nor blaming himself for the bloody path that led him here. Yet the realm needed him as a steady hand, and that, at least, he could provide. In that steadiness, the realm found a measure of grace. And in that measure of grace, Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, found enough redemption to keep going. Thus the final legacy of the boy from Winterfell, once called a bastard, once called the White Wolf, once called king in the north, and now king of the Seven Kingdoms, was not one of flashy triumph. It was not built on dragon flame or grand crusades. It was built on quiet resilience, relentless compassion, and a refusal to abandon the living for the sake of old grudges. Perhaps that was the truest break from the wheel of power, a reign defined not by conquest, but by care. In the echoes of the Red Keep's halls, in the blossoming of new marketplaces, in the subtle forging of laws that allowed commoners a voice, one might sense the shape of that new future. And though the names of past kings and queens lingered, Aegon, Rhaegar, Daenerys, the people now spoke of Jon with simpler words. He's the king who never wanted a crown, yet never stopped wearing it with humility. When winter eventually returned in the latter years, it was gentler. The harvest stores, well managed by the crown's local councils, fed the people. No apocalypse loomed, no dragon's sword. As the snow swirled around King's Landing, dusting the city in white, Jon stood on the walls again, recalling the vantage that once showed a ruin. Now it showed a city lit from within, forging ahead despite the cold. Ghost pressed close, the direwolf's coat blending with the snow. Jon closed his eyes and imagined a future beyond his own life, children playing in courtyards, fields growing, the realm at peace. It was not guaranteed, and no one had illusions of perfection. But it was possible, and that was enough. He felt the swirl of the wind, carrying faint scents of pine and the sea of the many lands under his care. Somewhere out there, the last embers of Targaryen fanaticism might still smolder, but they no longer defined Westeros' destiny. People built, loved, and dreamed without the constant thunder of war. In that moment, he silently dedicated himself anew to the vow he had taken upon accepting the crown he never desired, to protect those who could not protect themselves, to guide the realm with justice tempered by mercy, and to stand firm against any who would drag them back into chaos. He was no perfect king, but he was a king who had suffered enough to know the price of cruelty. That in the end might be the realm's greatest shield. So he turned from the wall, cloak trailing in the snow, ghost at his heels, and descended into the Red Keep to face another day of governance. Another day of ensuring the people were fed, that quarrels were solved, that no new self-styled conqueror rose from across the seas. Another day of forging a future where the memory of dragons, both majestic and terrible, became a story rather than a threat. And if now and then, at the edge of sleep, he thought he heard Daenerys' voice or felt her warmth, he would not deny it. She had once carried a dream of freedom, and while she lost herself to its darker impulses, a kernel of her vision remained alive in him. He would not forget that. He would remember her as she was before madness overtook her, a breaker of chains, not a destroyer of cities. Perhaps that memory would temper him if ever ambition grew too strong in his heart. In that quiet, unassuming way, King Jon Targaryen, once Snow, carved a place in history unlike any of his ancestors. Neither revered as a conquering hero nor reviled as a mad tyrant, he was remembered as the king who refused to let the realm tear itself apart again, who refused to place himself above the lives of common folk. Legends might call him the twice-born king, the man who rose from death to save the living, only to kill the queen who threatened all. Scholars might debate his lineage, analyzing every shred of Targaryen or Stark blood. Bards might sing of the dire wolf and the dragon that found harmony in him. But for most who lived under his rule, he was simply Jon, the quiet man with dark hair, solemn eyes, and a dire wolf at his side who brought them enough peace to rebuild their homes and families. And so, in the annals of Westeros, the line of Targaryen did not end in fire or madness. It ended, instead, in steady hands and a determined heart, forging a realm that learned to live without the roar of dragons overhead. Whatever future rose from these foundations might still face storms, but at least for one generation, the realm knew a king who strove, day by day, to preserve the precious gift of peace. In that, Jon Snow's watch continued, an unending vigil of compassion and responsibility until the realm no longer needed him to stand guard against the ghosts of the past.